All right, perfect. Daniel Burke, my good friend.
Hello, good evening. How are you?
I'm good. How's it going? I tried to do this earlier, but the last space failed for some reason. So I'm so glad that you've come on, because I can't direct this convo by myself. So,
well, I'm glad to do this with you. It'll be fun.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we had a lot more people in the last space, so I'm probably going to, tweet about it. But please, what is the biggest issue you have with Joe Biden so far? I'm curious to hear.
Well, I see one of the hosts of CGTN International Radio on here, Anna G.E., and she interviewed Helga Zepp-LaRouche, the founder and chairwoman of the Schiller Institute, just a couple of days ago. I hope you, if you'd like to speak up, Anna, please do. And I agree with the basic strategic concept of Mrs. LaRouche, which is that there is an urgent need for a totally new paradigm to address the needs of human beings across the world. We have a crisis where 2.3 billion people, according to the United Nations, are living with moderate to extreme food insecurity, and this will rapidly turn into a extraordinary number of people dying of famine if we do not do something about it. If nations across the world do not collaborate, end all of the sanctions that are presently making it increasingly difficult for humanity to feed itself, end the green policies like the set-aside policies 30 by 30 that intends to set aside 20 to 30% of agricultural fields to not be used for agricultural production in the name of environmentalism. We have to shut that down. We have to encourage the kind of advancement of the Turkey, UN, Ukraine, Russia deal to get grain moving out of the Black Sea. And we need to reorganize the financial system and the economy of the world in order to initiate big projects that are going to be necessary to lift all of humanity out of poverty. We need to eradicate poverty in the entire world. And it's very clear that Joe Biden stands in the way of that. He's advancing policies of sanctions, of war that endanger humanity with nuclear war. He needs we actually need to have leadership in this country that can respond to the proposals of China, like the Global Development Initiative announced by President Xi Jinping last year, and the Global Security Initiative recently announced. We need to have thorough collaboration between the sovereign nations of this planet towards solving these grave crises, and Biden is standing in the way of that right now.
Yeah, I am with you completely. And I mean, here's a simple question I have for you. What would you say to those who are saying things like, we shouldn't drill for fossil fuels right now, and we should push this green agenda, in the middle of this inflation crisis, this energy crisis? How would you respond to those people? Progressives mostly.
Well, the first thing I would say directly is that it is not true that an increase in man-made CO2 is going to create some kind of a climate crisis. This is a fraud. If you look into the actual science of this, I've posted recently a wonderful lecture by Dr. William Happer of Princeton, who demonstrates this. There is no reason to believe the completely failed climate predictions that have been made over the past 30 to 40 years. In fact, this has been from the beginning what is called by the Indian foreign minister climate colonialism. In other words, BlackRock doesn't give a damn about the environment or the planet, so-called. What they care about is crushing economic development and maintaining a system of financial oligarchy in the world in which people's needs are not met. And instead, you have the domination by a handful of people. I mean, of course, Putin has coined this term, the golden billion, or at least he's been using that term, to discuss the way that people in Europe and in the United States act as though the billion or so people that live in that part of the world have rights that the rest of the world do not have. That's what this thing has been all along. And they're completely missing the situation. we're going to have to develop Africa. Humanity must create conditions so that the nations of Africa can fulfill the potentials of their own populations and exercise their right to sovereign economic development, their sovereign right to full physical economic development. If you're going to do that, then the nations of Africa have to have the right to develop clean coal and any kind of coal that they want. They need to be able to develop their oil, their petroleum. They need to be able to develop nuclear power, both fission and soon enough fusion power. And any effort to block that is a complete fraud. It's something many people in the West believe these things because they're unquestioning about the propaganda that they receive. But if you look at the people who have really authored these policies, Sir Michael Bloomberg, Mark Carney, the former head of the Bank of England, Prince Charles, their stated position is that we should move to net zero carbon emissions. Do they say we should eradicate poverty and reduce CO2? Hell no. They don't give a damn about eradicating poverty. That's not in the plans. The policy of eliminating CO2 has only one effect. It prevents people from being able to have electricity for hospitals, for factories, for schools. The answer has got to be to rapidly increase the coal, the oil that is being used, the petroleum that's being used to provide for populations across the planet so that we can do the things that are necessary. To give people another example of this, how were people being able to eat before this economic crisis began? Like, for example, before the pandemic? No, there were 800 million people that were food insecure before the pandemic. So what do? You take a look at the amount of grain that we produce in the world. It's only about 2.7 billion tons of grain, but we need about half a ton per person per year. So we really need about 4 billion tons of grain in the world. We should be doubling the food production, grain, but other things as well. We should be increasing the physical capability of humanity. And if we do that, we're going to see the richest period of growth for our species that we've ever seen. We're going to see flowering culture, science, and development in every part of the world. And that's going to require moving forward quickly to address these needs, which means pushing back against this climate colonialism and bringing forward total economic growth.
Yeah, I'm with you completely. Now, before I go into partisan politics, if you want to speak, send me a request. I also think that there is, hold on one second, we have another speaker. If you want to unmute yourself and give me your input, that would be great. One sec. Yeah. US UK media monitoring. Go ahead. You can unmute yourself.
Hello, Samirah.
Hi.
Everything is fine. Thanks a lot, actually. I can see the title impeach Joe Biden, but I don't really know the context.
Joe Biden has failed in every respect. And I do remember during the Trump administration, every other minute, there would be Democrats calling for the impeachment of Donald Trump. We're not doing the same. We're not holding Joe Biden to the same standard, even though he's pushed policies that are even worse, not just for the American people, but also globally.
Thank you very much, Samirah. I'm just going to make a brief comment. And however, I'm just not living in the US, actually. I'm living in the UK. But I'm thinking actually that Joe Biden is something like a better, has gone through a better way than Donald Trump, because Donald Trump was definitely perpetuating hatred among America. We can see, let's say, we can remind ourselves of what happened in Capitol Hill, which was a disgrace, let's say, for the United States stature, for the United States credibility across the world. And it was very sad. So I know some people are laughing here. I really don't know. But I think Joe Biden is supporting, he was here last year supporting the COP26, the conference of the parties regarding the climate change and these things. So I'm saying that the people like Donald Trump and the people inside, let's say, the grand old party, which I think they should be the Republican Party, there are some figures there that they're denying climate change. It's, let's say, something like a disgrace to the students at American universities. They are doing their PhDs comments on climate change and global warming on the existential threat that we are faced. But I think Joe Biden is on a better track than Donald Trump. I'm really sorry if you don't agree. Thank you.
I think the best person to respond to this would be Danny. He is a speaker. So Danny, please unmute yourself and go in.
Yeah. How's it going, everyone? How's it going, Samirah, Daniel? For those of you that aren't aware, I was recently suspended, and my account was permanently suspended right before I hit 2,000 followers. I was on the cusp of hitting 2,000 followers, and Twitter decided to, put an end to my account to try and censor me, I guess. But it feels good to be back. It feels good to be here, and I'm not going anywhere.
So, Danny, my question was about, let's say, Joe Biden doing better than Donald Trump, because he's somehow trying to comply with standard accepted global bars, I can say. Take the climate change and the global warming and the summit and the declaration endorsement, let's say, the amount of the effort the United States can put, let's say, on achieving the targets for the COP26 by just making free emission kind of machines and these things and really taking the climate threat seriously. Let's say at the other end, we can see that Donald Trump, he's not definitely caring about the climate change. He's denying, let's say, this very important scientific reality. And it's really hard for me to see some of the Americans really accepting, let's say, the narrative of Donald Trump regarding global warming.
I don't buy into this European, New York, London based concept of global carbon lowering of emissions. I mean, the only people that this agenda benefits are the oil and gas monopolies ultimately. I mean, they want to keep India, China, the rest of the third world from developing gas and oil industry that they don't even have yet. So when they say to bring down carbon emissions, what they're really saying is to don't develop. They're telling the world, they're telling the parts of the world that haven't developed yet to don't start, because they already have a control of world gas and oil markets. Why would they want competitors rising? Why would they want India, for example, industrializing and becoming a competitor on the world market? I think that's the only reason behind this whole climate agenda. It's to secure monopolies that already exist. And frankly, people all around the world in their billions don't buy it. And to have Joe Biden as like the head of your, as the face of your movement, of your anti-climate change movement, it just brings it just discredits your whole facade. I mean, Joe Biden obviously isn't in control of anything. The man has dementia. He's taking orders from whoever's...
and also, real quick on January 6th. I'm an American. I was born here. I've lived here my entire life. I don't give a flying fuck about January 6th. The, I guess, effect of January 6th is hyper exaggerated in the media, and Democrats will not shut the fuck up about it. And I'm really sick.
Yeah, no one really cares about January 6th, honestly, unless you're like a hardcore Democrat.
Effect on the American people. It's just something that the media loves to talk about to portray Donald Trump as a unique evil. I just don't think that's the case.
I'd like to make a brief comment to the speaker. I think your moral view as a representative of the rules-based order, in whatever respect you are, is betrayed fully by the approach that you have to this topic. Because anyone who is thoughtful in the slightest realizes that Joe Biden and his administration have absolutely no regard for the value of human life. And this is made extremely apparent by the policy of destroying the economy of Afghanistan after 20 years of absolutely destructive war. Everyone knows that the Joe Biden administration has frozen $9 billion of Afghan central bank assets, and that the consequence of this has been that 22 million out of about 38 million people who live in that country have been thrown into position of starvation. So if you come out and you say that Joe Biden is somehow promoting peace and development or whatever, is not hateful like Trump, you come off sounding like someone who really believes that the lives of Afghans are not important, but rather the way that you pay obeisance to Mother Nature, to Gaia, as Prince Charles would like us to do.
Yeah, you don't have to raise your hand. You can just interrupt whenever.
May I just make a comment, Samirah?
Please, go ahead.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Danny. Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Samirah, let's say, for the comments. Actually, regarding Afghanistan, you're 110% right, Daniel, actually. So Joe Biden's irresponsible decision, let's say, for the withdrawal from Afghanistan has left that country into a very catastrophic situation. I know about the famine. I know about the...
I'm sorry. He's
the human rights breach, human rights violations. Let's say, I can say mass killings by the Taliban and these things, but let's not forget, it was Donald Trump, actually. It was Zalmay Khalilzad, the US envoy, a Republican, actually going to Doha, to Qatar, and let's say, making the way forward for the deal. And it was the Joe Biden, let's say, that came to the power in America, actually, and tried to keep, let's say, the same amount of accords that Republicans, especially envoy Zalmay Khalilzad, who signed, let's say, the agreement, the deal with the Taliban. It was really, we should definitely think about Donald Trump about this one. The second thing, actually...
No, I have to interrupt you because you're just lying. The policy of America being in Afghanistan at all was heinously, absolutely wrong. And it's ridiculous to talk about the consequences in Afghanistan as being merely, Trump's fault. Trump contributed to problems there. And for you to act like this is, Biden was trying to do... Anyway, I'm sorry. You go ahead, guys.
I don't understand this... calling back to the existence of the Taliban. Everyone understands that the policies of the United States towards Afghanistan has killed more Afghanis than the Taliban ever did.
And also, I was a big supporter of the Doha Accords. The fact that Donald Trump decided to sit down with the Taliban and come to some sort of agreement, some sort of withdrawal deadline that he met every single withdrawal deadline. It was actually Joe Biden who did not meet the May 1st deadline, and he pushed it to whenever it was. I think it was like August.
9/11.
Consulting the Taliban, and the Taliban even said Joe Biden broke the deal. So
I want to suggest that recognizing that this representative according to their Twitter profile, is a representative of the Foreign Office of the United Kingdom. Maybe this is a pretty important space for us to be holding if they decide that they have to intervene immediately to defend the US-UK special relationship. It's time to end the special relationship. It's time to kick the British monarchy out of this country and every effort that they have to control this policy. And it's time to put the City of London and Wall Street into complete bankruptcy reorganization. That's the only way that mankind is going to be able to create peace.
That's the only way that America is going to be a pariah state.
Wonderful, because all the other pariah states are doing pretty great.
Yeah, I have no issue with that.
So Daniel, do you want, let's say, the United States of America to be another Russia?
Why don't you tell us your name, sir?
Can I ask a question to the host?
Let's hear who this person is first.
You say the United States will be a pariah on the world stage. A pariah to who exactly? If say the United States is the breaking away from the system, the United States would be a pariah to England?
Regarding, let's say, kicking everyone out of America.
I don't want to talk to a representative of the British Foreign Office unless we know what his name is.
The United Kingdom is a pariah state. The United Kingdom is a pariah state.
In a hypothetical situation where the United States breaks away from the English system and joins hand in hand with Russia and China, I think the only pariah in the world would be England.
You don't have to raise your hand. You can just speak.
Daniel and Samirah, actually, let me tell you something about Afghanistan. So think about this one. It was the 1980s back in Afghanistan that America, it was the CIA, let's say, that supported the Mujahideen, as well as the MI6 of the UK. I can't really deny this one. All supported the Mujahideen. They, let's say, caused the global jihadi extremism in the first place. Why? Because they wanted that pro-communist regime to be defeated. The lesson that we can learn from this one is that we shouldn't use religion as a tool, for example. So it was Osama bin Laden brought by America, let's say, from Egypt in Afghanistan, let's say, to fight and to launch a proxy war against the Russians in Afghanistan. So currently, Afghan people are paying the price because they were the battleground between the communism, let's say, and the imperialism to fight with each other. And so you can see, apart from President Obama, let's say, that
the lesson is it's none of our business. I think that's the lesson, right?
Well, the CIA was founded by the British as the OSS.
It was founded by the British. I know about, let's say, the USCOM, United States Special Operations Command. They were all, even I can say, the Federal Investigations and other organizations inside the EU establishment.
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
By the UK, but the reality is this one. Currently, the Americans, they own those organizations.
Okay, I'm going to take my privilege as co-host here. Okay, And I am so glad that the UK Foreign Office decided that they wanted to talk to us. Please express for us what your name is and tell us what office you hold at the UK Foreign Office. And then we'd be happy to have some kind of a debate or discussion with you. You shouldn't hide behind some anonymous account.
Daniel, I'm not hiding behind anything, actually. To tell you the truth, I'm myself from Afghanistan. I'm a refugee in the UK, actually, currently living here. And that you can see, let's say, the title of my account, it's US-UK Media Monitoring. It's nothing else, actually. So I've firsthand, I've been, let's say, the victim of...
Do you work for the UK Foreign Office?
I'm not working for the UK Foreign Office. No, not really.
So why is it in your Twitter bio?
You can just read it. US-UK Media Monitoring. We monitor
the website you have there.
Across the website is not mine. It's not an official account.
So you're just sort of a. Thank you for clarifying. Thank you for clarifying. Now I understand that you. Now I understand that you are basically a sort of volunteer on behalf, in your own informal way, of the UK Foreign Office. Thank you for clarifying.
You can interpret it anyway.
Oh, and to follow up on that, to follow up on Daniel.
So you're not getting paid for this, US, UK. You're just doing this for fun.
To follow up on Daniel, now that we know who exactly we're dealing with, what we're dealing with here, I'd like to ask a question. What is the benefit of the US-UK relationship?
May I answer the question?
Yes, go ahead.
Look at this one, actually. So when we are saying, for example, that the US is a global hegemon, who US somehow has got a power to convene, let's say, why it has got the power? Because lots of countries are supporting, let's say, they are somehow in a treaty, and that treaty is called the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, actually. So it means that if the European allies, including the UK, are not standing and will not stand with the US, then believe me, let's say the US will not have the same power that they have got now. And so I think it's important for the Western countries, let's say, to be in a state to support democracy around the world, let's say, to support beyond.
No. The U.S. saved England in World War II, and since then has been the dominant power in the world. So, I mean, Britain is getting way more than the U.S. is getting out of the friendship. You know, we're kind of carrying these people along, just like we're carrying Germany along and the rest of NATO.
Once again, no need to raise your hand if you want to speak. Just interrupt. That's all.
Okay, thank you very much. What you have told, actually, I definitely agree with you. It was, let's say, the help of the Americans and, let's say, the Russians in the Second World War, actually, they came to the help, let's say, in Europe, and they helped. But no one can deny that we have got lots of things at stake together, let's say. Currently, we are faced with a very big problem, and that with a very big autocratic kind of regime, and that's China. And you know that, let's say, that currently we have lost Russians. Russians are not and will not be on our side.
I agree with you. I don't think China and Russia are the problem. I think U.S. foreign policy is the problem.
U.S. foreign policy can be a problem, actually. You can just interpret it, you're entitled to your idea. But the one thing that we can say is, what's the problem with supporting democracy across the world? What's supporting... That's the
talking point. That's the talking point, is supporting democracy. Democracy is not bombing, villagers in Afghanistan and killing 2 million Iraqi civilians and, killing world leaders across the world.
I know firsthand about Afghanistan. Killing Taliban. You know what Taliban are doing currently? They're just committing killings.
I don't think you know what Taliban are doing.
They are committing genocide, let's say. By all means, they're doing these things.
No, you said you agreed with me when I said that Joe Biden doesn't give a damn about human life and that his policy was driving 22 million people in Afghanistan into starvation. That is genocide, and you are full of it.
Right.
No, from Afghanistan, the decision by the Joe Biden was an unresponsible one. I just made this point very clear, actually.
You guys are speaking at cross purposes. Daniel is referring to withholding, however many millions from Afghanistan. You're talking about the withdrawal.
9 billion.
And regarding the billions, a very good point. Let me to answer this question, actually. Think about this one. We don't need to give, let's say, the money for the Taliban. We don't need to fund terrorism.
Yes, we understand. You don't care about the 22 million people who are starving.
You have a very singular, one-sided view.
Taliban are still on the list of the blacklist of the United Nations, on the blacklist of the European Council on Human Rights, actually, and definitely the United States of America. So how you're just somehow arguing, Daniel, that we need to give $9 billion, let's say, to Taliban?
No, we didn't give it.
Their money. It's their money.
Exactly.
They're the government of Afghanistan. It's none of our business what kind of foreign government they have.
No. The Taliban Taliban are not the legitimate representatives of the Afghan people.
You have no desire to care for the needs of the population of Afghanistan. Why would anyone trust you with any policy?
I'm actually very, very passionate about this issue because my background is Afghani. And, you know, when people paint the Taliban as evil and the U.S. is kind of like the saviors, you know, it's very silly and it's very one-sided and it just comes off very ignorant. You got to look at it with nuance, right? Just because the government is telling you that the Taliban is that they're the enemy. Your government is your enemy, right? The Taliban is not taxing you, taking 30% of your income, right? Your government is taking 30% of your income.
Let's say 3,000 people on September of 9th of September.
Oh my God!
Actually, and you remember this one? That's not right.
I'd like to ask you
if you just believe each case.
That was the Taliban.
If you want to say that it's something, then I believe that you're a conspiracy theorist, man.
You could call me whatever you want. I think it's like regurgitating media talking points, dude.
But even the media says it was Al Qaeda who did it. They don't say it's the Taliban, right?
Yeah, like you have a very
but they have
you have a very NPC attitude towards this.
Yeah, let me
try to answer this question, Samirah. So Samirah, let me to make this point. Actually, that's definitely right, Doctor. It was Al Qaeda. Let's say 11 Al Qaeda fighters from Saudi Arabia and other countries that conducted the hijack of the airplanes, but they were in Afghanistan. They had events in Afghanistan, and they're still there.
They were harbored by anti-Taliban warlords, not the Taliban themselves. And the Taliban, they offered to hand over bin Laden on multiple occasions.
No. It's the Taliban that they have got the same mentality, the same mindset.
What do you mean by mentality?
Mindset? Mentality, I mean just they have the same Islam. The Taliban's Al Qaeda, ISIL, and Taliban, they're on the same page.
Yeah, the Taliban is fighting ISIS.
There's a really interesting circumstance I'd like to discuss regarding the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan. In 2000, at the beginning of 2001, the Taliban government, pre-invasion, instituted a ban on the production of opium poppy cultivation, and the production of opium poppy fell almost completely to 0%. But shortly after, we all know the United States invaded the country, and by 2002, opium poppy cultivation had risen back up to 8,000 hectares of land. Is there any explanation? Can you give us any explanation as to why this happened exactly? It seems kind of suspicious to people all around the world that have a serious problem with opium.
I would just come to this question and I would just answer this question fully. That's the problem, actually. Currently, we understand, we know, I can confirm that Afghanistan is somehow producing the 90% of the opium in these things of the world. And you're right, definitely, after invasion of the United States and the Western allies in 2001, let's say, somehow the rates raised. And the reasons can be different reasons. And so one of the reasons that you're telling is about, let's say, the knowledge of the local farmers, that they came to understand this one, that if they just cultivate and if they just plant, or if they have more actually farms with poppy, then they will just benefit from this one. It was the understanding in these things. And definitely they were all under those places, those farms were under the control of the Taliban. They were the Taliban mostly in the south of the country, mostly in Kandahar, mostly in Helmand. If you check, let's say, the open sources and other sources that you have access, Daniel, you can see that province is called Helmand, actually, and it's a Taliban-dominated kind of province. So the Taliban...
I'm sorry, I muted everyone by accident, but I'm going to do it again. Okay, we got to stop for a moment, and I need to go over a few things with Danny's help and with Samirah's help. Because Helmand province is the province that was run by the British, first of all.
Interesting.
Exactly.
I think that the issue that we're dealing with right here should be really clear to people. This is an intelligence agent, perhaps MI6, perhaps something else, coming out of London, trying to intervene into an American political effort that is independent, that is being organized online by young people associated with Samirah, with Haas, with Danny, with other people, that is committed to turning the U.S. away from this climate change nonsense, which is intended to create the destruction of human life across the planet on behalf of the central banks of Wall Street, or of Europe and the United States, especially the role of the City of London. That's what this is all about. That's why this guy came in and started this whole thing. Now, what is the Schiller Institute doing about this? I have to speak to that. You will see among the pinned tweets that I put at the top of this space, the proposals to actually work together with Russia, with Pakistan, with India, with China to build the necessary medical infrastructure to ensure the people of Afghanistan are able to live. There is an extraordinary crisis in which the clinics that should be able to serve the people are not able to do so in a very large majority of them because of the freezing of $9 billion of central bank assets of Afghanistan by the Biden administration. This is a policy that British establishment is completely in agreement with, as you can tell from the comments of this gentleman. But if you look at the top, the most recent thing that I shared at the top, you can see the Schiller Institute proposal for the total fundamental physical economic development of Afghanistan. These are networks of rail, of water, of power that we have proposed. You look at the work of Hussein Askari, the Southwest coordinator of the Schiller Institute, to learn more. And what it manifests is the expansion of the Belt and Road Initiative and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor into Afghanistan. Everyone who's not a representative of the British establishment knows that this is the way to peace, and that if we want to bring about a better future for the people of Afghanistan, in fact, this could be a paradigm shift, because what is really urgently needed is some form of mutual collaboration between the U.S., Russia, and China. Otherwise, Liz Truss and the people who will follow Bojo generally are going to get us into nuclear war with Russia or nuclear war with China. Pelosi's going to trigger that. That type of action is indicative of a policy orientation that can only lead to confrontation. And we might have stupid enough and lunatic enough political figures that they would actually do it and bring about the end of humanity. So if you want some place where the great nations of the world can collaborate, bring them together in Afghanistan and rebuild and create the potential for that civilization to be, full of the potential of its own citizens. So, for example, one of the crucial things that I'll finish with here is that we've named this proposal Operation Ibn Sina after the Ibn Sina, the great doctor and philosopher, Islamic doctor and philosopher who lived in the area of Afghanistan, Persian most likely, and who contributed tremendously to the development of human thought. That this is exactly the kind of height of culture that we know from that part of the world, and it can be the name of the future action to reverse the most grievous crimes that have been committed against the people of Afghanistan.
Thank you, Daniel. Actually, you made several points, actually. And so I can prove that I'm from Afghanistan. I can speak Persian, I can speak Pashto. If anyone here, including Samirah and HK, they know Persian and Pashto, then I can introduce myself. I can talk, actually.
I didn't claim that you weren't from Afghanistan. I said that you work for a British intelligence service.
A refugee in the UK. When you're a refugee, for example, you're not a fully citizen. You're not a citizen.
Can I ask you, and then I'll let you speak. I'm interrupting you a lot, I realize. But can I ask you, do you work for a British intelligence service?
Not really. Not really. I'm not.
Not really.
Maybe a little bit. Maybe a little.
Are you from Afghanistan? Have you got roots from Afghanistan?
No, answer the question. What do you mean by not really?
What do you really mean, actually? If I'm working for intelligence,
We are not as stupid as you might believe. Americans are actually fairly street smart, you know?
Okay,
it's bizarre to me that you'd be doing this for free.
I'll grant him this. I'll grant him. Maybe he's working for intelligence. Just a little tiny bit. Maybe like a side gig. You know how we gotta do Uber. We gotta do Uber. He's doing intelligence work.
Friday,
right?
just Monday through Friday.
He might not even know. Like, do you work for an NGO?
That's right. The question is, what do you work for? And how is it that you do, to some extent, work for British intelligence, my friend?
This is 6 News at 11.
Oh my God. Can you just please turn off your mic? Daniel,
Please answer the question.
No. I'm answering you the question. When I'm saying that I'm not working anywhere, actually.
It's a simple question. Why did you say not really when we asked you if you work for British intelligence? Which service do you work for?
Like a lawyer, bro.
Who funds your media organization?
I don't need to actually answer this question. If you're just asking me if you're working, but when I'm saying no, then that's no, actually. I don't.
So then who does fund your media organization?
People are here in this space to listen to us, actually, to listen to the
Who funds you? Who funds your group? Who funds your organization?
To the arguments and counter arguments. We don't need to come, let's say, to...
Who funds your organization?
You say that you're Afghan. You're not Pashtun. That's for sure. You're a minority who's upset at the Pashtun majority and the Taliban that it's in power. It's very clear. You're not fooling anybody, my friend.
It sounds like you have an issue with Islamic government as well. I mean, that's been the feeling I've gotten.
Actually, there haven't been any official statistic to call the majority.
Who funds your organization? You're not allowed to. You're not allowed to continue in this. You're not allowed to continue in this space unless you say so. I'm just going to kick you. Who funds your organization?
This is your logic. That's very sad, actually. Believe me.
Who funds your organization?
Who funds my organization? No one. Who funds my organization? It's a media monitoring organization. It is by myself. I'm trying to check the media. Let's say I'm trying to check and to know about the people from countries. Actually.
So why did you say not really when we asked you, do you work for British intelligence?
If you were smart, you just would have said no.
No, you just clean my words, Daniel. That's not nice.
Well, why didn't you say no and instead you said not really?
The content of our analysis.
You can't take the heat, buddy. You're new.
So, yeah, that's it. I don't see any reason to keep an admitted British intelligence agent in
Let me
this
tell you who funds me. Who do I get my funding from? The person who funds me is me. I fund myself. I go to my job 7 days a week, and I work for money, and that's who's funding me. Now, who's funding you?
Daniel, who's funding you? Daniel, who's funding you?
Me.
Daniel's information is in his bio. It's not some.
I work for. I work with the.
I think that the question that Daniel is asking is valid because we don't know who you are. You're just a random, let's just say US UK media monitoring outfit, right? You're not.
You say we. You said we in your bio. There's more than one of you.
Excuse me?
In his bio, it says we monitor the most comprehensive, etc. He's a group, or he's representing some kind of group.
I think it's a valid question to ask. Who are you and what to do? Because all of our information is out there. You can see what we do.
Yeah, you can see exactly who I am, my friend. I'm not hiding from anybody.
That's why. I would like to know who you are and what organization you represent.
He's a wannabe spook, and he's gonna not answer the question.
Let him answer the question.
I'm just answering the question. Listen, my friends, actually, believe me, I came here with great respect to everyone, just thinking about this and that I will be part of a discussion. I was not thinking that I will be a speaker here. And so being accused of being, let's say, a spy or some kind of an intelligence organization, believe me, I'm just somehow appalled with myself that how the people are just very simply accusing other people. I have just only had this account as a name, US UK Media Monitoring. It's all by myself. I'm trying to share the different things. I'm trying to read the different things. And
what exactly are you looking for?
Just one moment, Samirah, please. Samirah. And simply accusing you, actually. This is very sad. I don't think, actually, we can have a conversation like this. We can listen to ourselves. We can critique other points of views, actually.
I've been very, very polite.
Listen, Samirah, we need to listen to arguments and counter arguments.
Okay, I'm a little bit more, I move a little bit more quickly. And I just want to say that you don't have any right to speak and communicate your bullshit. We have every right to ask you if you are a British intelligence agent working for a British intelligence service, to which you responded, not really. And we have a right to kick people out who are doing that kind of thing. Because what is going on, and anyone who is really paying attention will realize, is that there has been a shift towards a political tendency in the United States that is sufficiently independent to respond to the proposals of Russia and China and of the BRICS nations generally to organize a new paradigm for humanity in which we will cut out the City of London forever, and we will crush this policy of financial oligarchism as it is expressed by Wall Street and the City of London. We will eliminate it. And the UK Foreign Office is nothing other than an appendage of that institution. So the way forward is for the US, Russia, China, India to collaborate. We're going to develop Africa. We're going to produce tons of CO2, which is massively increase the plant life in the world. And we are going to erase the idea of the British Empire forever, with the US, Russia, India, and China leading the way in the development of a new Bretton Woods, new international financial system that will guarantee the ability to bring about the world land bridge.
Yeah, we're going to put so much carbon in the atmosphere that centipedes are going to be 6 feet long again. That's how much carbon we're going to put in the atmosphere.
Everybody, don't let US, UK derail us from our original discussion. I think he's just coming in to kind of stir the pot and distract everybody from what we're talking about. So yeah, let's not pay him too much more mind.
I kind of appreciate him because, I mean, if you look at his bio and his tweets and the kind of stuff he says, he has this completely media brain mentality where, I mean, it's bizarre. He's not even a normie. He's like an NPC. That's what I said.
I said that like 5 minutes ago. I said
I'm just going to give from this space. So thank you very much. I have respect for each and every one of you.
Hold on. We have some facts for you. Hold on. Prism has facts for you. I want to get a word in. This guy came in saying that Afghanistan, there's like a genocide being committed there. What genocide? What genocide, dude? What are you talking about? I have all the facts pulled up right now.
Talking, let's say, about the genocide, the mass killings, the mass violence by the Taliban.
What mass killings? The
mass killings in Panjshir Valley, actually. You've got
Panjshir Valley. You mean of the militias that were the U.S. backed?
The anti-Taliban opposition who
the resistance front led by Ahmad Massoud, the son of Ahmad Shah Massoud.
Yeah, that was an armed insurrection.
He's not Taliban. He's not Taliban.
They're fighting against the Taliban. They want freedom for Afghanistan. They want the Afghan women can
they want Bacha Bazi in the fucking country.
1 second. The man that you just mentioned a few months ago met with Eric Prince of Blackwater in Tajikistan, neighboring Tajikistan. What do you make of that?
Samirah, you know what's the problem? The problem is this one, that he met that one. We should think about the cause. What do you want to achieve in Afghanistan?
It's very important.
You want to bring
Blackwater.
You want freedom for the people of Afghanistan and for Afghan girls.
What's that supposed to mean?
We don't
what
does that mean? Because Daniel sat, let's say, with Donald Trump, then he's about.
What's freedom?
Like that.
What's freedom? What's freedom?
Samirah,
what's freedom?
Not a friend of Muslims or of Afghani people, my friend.
Repeat again.
Eric Prince is not a friend of Muslims and Afghani people. He owned Blackwater, dude. Now he's running security for China. You got to be kidding me.
He owns Blackwater. I know definitely this one. And they were, let's say, Blackwater kind of mercenaries in Afghanistan. They were fighting, and let's say the people for security and these things in Afghanistan against the Taliban and ISIS-K, which is
you're spreading misinformation, my friend.
No, it's okay.
I think what he's saying is important. He's saying that it's not
I'm going to make my point and have a conclusion, and after that I will leave this space, actually. So thank you very much, guys. Regarding Afghanistan, keep in mind that Taliban are back in Afghanistan. They are a threat to every one of us. Why? Because they have a mindset to kill all the non-believers.
Bullshit.
Bullshit.
Because
that's a bunch of BS.
Yeah.
Bullshit.
We just have to ask, all we have to do is ask the question, who is bringing more harm and who is killing more Afghanis? The Taliban or Western sanctions?
Western sanctions, and not just Western sanctions, Western-backed militias like the ones in Panjshir that this clown was talking about.
The Western sanctions are because of the Taliban. Taliban, they have caused, let's say, the different countries to sever the relationships with Afghanistan.
Listen. Pakistan is meeting with the Taliban. And
the Taliban are Afghani. The Afghani people have the right to choose their own government. And they shouldn't have to starve to death because you don't agree with what kind of government they have.
That's right. Then I want the Taliban, let's say, to hold an election in Afghanistan. Then why the Taliban are denying, let's say...
They're not a democracy, my friend. You cannot impose your beliefs on them. They have their own way of running things. All right? They want a democracy. They don't want to turn into this Western...
In Islam, the way to elect a leader is bay'at.
No, it isn't. No, it isn't. No.
It means or bayat. You know,
No, I'm sorry.
Actually, bayat is something like, if you translate in English, the word I'd say for bayat.
Like the Taliban. Now, because you're not happy with who's in power, you cannot say let's have another election. Blah 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 blah. That's BS.
Who is in power? Yeah, Taliban in power. This is the reality. But the Afghan people, they are determined to fight.
The majority of the Afghan people are Pashtun. The Taliban are Pashtun. So they don't want a minority Hazara government running things. I'm sorry.
No, that's not even what's going on. The Afghans, they have kind of...
Doctor, please. It's a narrative put forward by the Pashtuns that you are the majority in Afghanistan. They are not the majority. Do you have any official statistics? You know, Pashtuns are always trying to deny...
There hasn't been a census done in Afghanistan.
Because Pashtuns, but falsely, they want to claim that they are the majority in this country to be the superior, let's say.
So who's the majority?
The Pashtuns are supporting the Taliban. Why they're supporting the Taliban? Because they share...
Because they are the government of Afghanistan. Why are you supporting Ahmed Shah Massoud's son?
Pashtuns,
why are you supporting him?
Excuse me. Let me get a word in. There were actually elections held by the Taliban government as recent as in April of 2022, where in Kabul, people elected the Wakilun Guzar, or the neighborhood representatives in elections. This was in April, like 4 months ago.
There was April's election in Afghanistan in April?
He just destroyed you. He's got destroyed.
I can pull it up. It's an article from the Diplomat. It's not some random website.
Okay, there was no election, I can assure you, Doctor. So the last thing I would say...
No, there were elections.
He's just denying it. What a bitch. He got fucking destroyed.
How do I post the link on here?
Yeah, you can just...
If you send me the tweet, then we can make you co-host.
I'll definitely check this one. But there was any election in Afghanistan this year or last year, actually.
Wait. So who's the majority?
The last thing I would say is...
Hold on, guys. Hold on. You didn't answer. Who's the majority in Afghanistan? Stop talking over me. Who is the majority in Afghanistan?
Taliban? Because they share the same ethnicity. And that's
the question. Who's the majority?
Terrorism.
Who is the majority?
No one. There is no any official statistics, man. It's also a false narrative supported or perpetuated by Pashtuns that we are the majority. Can you just show me an official statistics, please? It's a false narrative, man. From centuries, it's false narratives. And it were Pashtuns, actually, that they sold the country. They sold the country on different times, that they haven't given Afghanistan a chance to survive. Always Pashtuns, Taliban, they were fighting. Why they were fighting?
The Pashtuns have been defending Afghanistan from invaders for the past 300 years. So what the fuck are you talking about?
The Pashtuns, they're closing currently the doors of the
school. They defended Afghanistan against the British. They defended Afghanistan against the Russians. They defended Afghanistan against the Americans.
I'm sure that we have...
What are you talking about?
I'm sure we have got people from Pakistan, actually, from the tribal areas, from Waziristan, the north.
They're still Pashtun. It doesn't matter.
And they're
Pashtuns are not just in Afghanistan. They're in Pakistan. They're in India.
No, I just want you to listen, actually, and after that to give an answer. Please do not interrupt. Otherwise, I don't have any option but to leave this space. Please respect the people that are here and they're wasting their time and listening, let's say. I'm making my point very clearly. And if you've got any counter argument, please, you can just make your point. I'm saying that these places that they're Pashtun dominated, look at Pakistan, look at Waziristan, look at the tribal areas, look at some places in Helmand in Afghanistan where they were supporting, let's say, the Taliban. The Taliban's traditional bases are among Pashtuns. The Pashtuns are supporting Taliban because they share the same ethnicity. They're Pashtuns. They want, let's say, they're only saying Islam, but Islam is only, let's say, a narrative. They want, let's say, their ethnicity to be holding the power to segregate others in Afghanistan, and they have made this false narrative of saying that we are the majority. They are not the majority.
Okay, that's besides the point. That's besides the point. You said that. Wait. You said that the Pashtuns have been selling out Afghanistan. How have they been selling out Afghanistan? That's all I want to know. What's your point?
Think about that Durant line. The Orient Line was signed by a Pashtun king. His name was Abdul Rahman. Check on the open sources. The Orient Line Treaty.
Okay.
Pakistan, let's say. Think about
for some context, the Durand Line separates Afghanistan and Pakistan. It's how Afghans claim Pakistani Pashtun territory. So that's some context. It's based on Pashtun ethnicity.
That's right. I'm telling you that because it was a Pashtun king. His name was Amir Abdul Rahman.
I don't agree with you. I just think that
no. He signed the treaty actually that separated those parts and gave that one to the British Raj or the British India, I can say.
That's because he lost the war. I mean, what could he do? Well, what would you have done?
Right.
He lost the war. What do you want him to do? What do you want him to do? Keep fighting?
But that doesn't mean that he sold out.
My soul is my mother. You know, in our tradition in Afghanistan, we call our land our mother. Actually, we should not give our mother to anyone.
But you're over here shilling for the UK. So what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, you're shilling for the same British Empire.
I'd like to intervene for a moment.
Hey, dude, I'm sorry. I think this guy is fucking retarded.
Okay, I'm going to make a short response to your comment, friend.
We deserve we deserve better, actually. You know.
Okay, I'm going to make a short comment because your words have clearly exposed you, and the problem of naturally is that the way that the British intelligence functions is through divide and conquer, especially on ethnic grounds, especially on religious grounds, and that's all you're doing is you're using an old playbook that no one with a brain cell is going to believe in because China has demonstrated to the world through the Belt and Road Initiative that peace is development. There is no such thing other than the mutual benefit, the common interest of all mankind. That's the only thing that can motivate the policies that are required going forward. And it's so clear what a failed and disgusting, frankly satanic ideology you represent. Because from the beginning of this conversation, the issue has been on the table. 22 million people are starving to death in that nation or in conditions that are taking them in that direction. The health care situation, the medical institutions in Afghanistan are practically falling apart. Most of them are not possible to be used by the population. There's an extraordinary level of malnutrition among children. And this is directly caused, as the diplomats of major nations across the world have stated, by the U.S. policy to block $9 billion of the Afghan central bank's funds, which has prevented that economy from having the liquidity to actually provide real forward progress for the population. So the fact that you continually ignore that and you attempt to create division on the basis of ethnic lines is just so old hat. Like, who on earth would endorse this kind of thought other than someone who has been, raised by Tony Blair in a cage? This is ridiculous. I think you should admit that your policies are completely failed, that you actually do not express any solution for the extraordinary human suffering in Afghanistan, and then you should take your tail between your legs and leave.
Out of respect, I just want only 3 minutes. 3 minutes to answer your questions, and after that, I will definitely leave. Daniel, listen, my brother, I really respect you, actually, even each person that they are in this space, and they deserve actually better treatment if any person comes, let's say, to be a speaker. Daniel, you're right. You're 110% right about the human catastrophe in Afghanistan. But I am asking that who caused this one, actually? Who were fighting in the 20 years to sabotage the security in Afghanistan? They were the Taliban. And regarding the funding, you are definitely right about the 9 billion reserves of the Afghan Central Bank currently held in American banks in those places. I'm telling you, the Taliban are corrupted. They're corrupted. We cannot trust Taliban, let's say, to deliver aid to the people of Afghanistan. The Taliban, they were killing the people of Afghanistan. They were committing suicide attacks, actually, killing children, killing innocent men and women in Afghanistan. How you can believe to hand over the funds of the Afghan people to give for a terrorist organization? First of all, Daniel, there there's a very small suggestion. Please listen. There is a suggestion. Talk to the State Department, talk to the Pentagon, talk to the Donald Trump, Joe Biden.
I'm sorry. Did you just say talk to the Pentagon and the State Department? I can't. I'm sorry. I tried to keep it together this entire time. I'm sorry. I can't.
Until for them to remove the Taliban from the blacklist of the UN, of the US, and after that one, if you have a definition for the Taliban that they are not a terrorist organization, then you can give the funds, let's say, to the Taliban as a government, but they are not elected by the people of Afghanistan. When they are not elected, it means that they are not the legitimate government of the people of Afghanistan.
They beat NATO.
Tough shit. I mean,
no. Hold on. If you want to talk about that, then the 2001 government installed by the U.S. and Western powers is not legitimate either. Who elected them? They put themselves into power with a gun.
There were elections in Afghanistan. At least the people of Afghanistan, the formation
of the government wasn't. The formation of the government was through military force. It was regime change.
It was a regime change in the Fed in 2001 because they killed 3,000 innocent people in New York, in Manhattan.
That wasn't the Taliban.
I really share the pain of those families of Americans in the United States, in New York, actually.
Okay, I don't think you should be allowed to say that absolutely disgusting lie about who killed the 3,000 Americans in 9/11. I really don't think we should allow this to continue.
And the last sentence I would say, my friends, Danny, just please, the last sentence I would say is that now I'm sure that why people like Donald Trump, they are getting elected in America, because of the people like Daniel, the people like Samirah. It's because of this one that people like Donald Trump can be president of America, and that's very sad and that's a shame. Thank you very much. Have a nice day.
You made this ridiculous argument that
defeated and religion will rule the earth. Okay,
the Taliban are to blame for the sanctions because they fought against the invasion for 20 years. That's exactly what he said.
That's right. I just want to make a brief statement and then I'll turn it over to someone else. I'm going to reiterate what I've said twice already. There is an independent political capability that is developing in the United States, and it has to do with the people who are involved right now in this space, who are speaking, who are listening, the people who are adjacent to it. And there is every effort being made, as you've seen from the Ukrainian Blacklist, which featured 31 out of 75 of those people were speakers at a recent Schiller Institute conferences, and Helga Zeplerush was number 2 on the list. It has to do with, you can see the censorship of people like Jackson Hinkle and, of course, Haas from Infrared and other efforts that have been made to shut people up. And this is not the only aspect of this new political independent capability, but that is a leading element of it, one of the crucial aspects of it. And I think that everyone here should be glad to recognize how significant your actions are, that we have to deal with this kind of thing. The fundamental thing I'll conclude with.
Sorry, that was too much.
I'll conclude with this. The representatives of the rules-based order express, as he did in that final statement where he told me we should talk to the Department of, to the State Department and the Pentagon, that the way that we're going to move forward is on the basis of positive law, on the basis of these, legalistic claims about rule and order. That is the enemy. The solution is natural law. The solution is the idea of justice from the standpoint of the creative development of mankind. It's the conception that every human being is born in the living image of God. And that is what these people oppose. They would rather say, no, mankind is an animal that has to follow the rules of the rules-based order. We can't allow that. That's what I wanted to share.
I think secularism never works. And that man is an example of why secularism will never work.
We are Palti posting right now. We are
that
Palti
was
posting
amazing.
in this chat.
Just talk to Joe Biden, talk to the State Department. Maybe, you should...
You need to talk to the Pentagon. You should talk to the Pentagon.
And convince the UN that the Taliban are not terrorists. I mean, I tried to keep it together, but then at that moment, I lost it.
I had to let that guy kind of hear it, because I think we were all being a little bit too patient with him.
It was entertaining at the very least.
That guy was glowy.
He was literally glowy. Of course he is. I mean, look at his profile. the 6 of us or 7 of us who are speakers, if we get suspended from Twitter tomorrow, you know why.
That already happened to me yesterday. So
he's like a great, well-spoken guy. He has 10 followers on Twitter. That's like a glowy. That's what that is.
Well, Rev, I think you came in a little bit late, but I asked him directly, do you work for a British intelligence service? And his response was, quote, not really.
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah, he said, it was like he had a 40 slip moment.
I mean, he was literally repeating word for word whatever, like garbage, the punch-eared clowns. Exactly. I think Samirah knows definitely who I'm talking about. Yeah, like he was just repeating word for word whatever lies they were saying. And as I sent to Daniel,
this is
and
the
he shared
successor of the Northern Alliance, and before that they were the basically the warlords that the Taliban fought in the civil war. So
yeah,
and they're known for being pederasts.
That's called Bachabazi.
Yeah, Bachabazi.
Yeah. And yeah, there are a bunch of like.
I was going to go there if we continued, but I didn't have the chance.
But like, I think that guy, if he was even Afghan at all, I really doubt he was. But if he even was Afghan, I think he was some kind of probably Khorasani nationalist, Tajik, some kind of like
hold on. There are some what are they called again? The Yousafzai family or whatever it is. Who are also
no. He's not Yousafzai. Yousafzai are Pathan. That guy was some weird. I don't know what the fuck he was.
Honestly, I think that I don't think he was Hazara. I think that he was another ethnicity. But I mean, is that really the point? I mean, the stuff that he was saying was total nonsense, and he was propping up like very openly. Usually, British intelligence is more tactful. They're slick, but this guy, I mean, he gave away his entire shtick. Also, I think it should be noted that the U.S. and the U.K., I think a couple of months ago, signed a deal to combat disinformation together. So I think that this U.S.-UK media monitoring service or this outfit might be part of that, I guess, effort.
It was weird how he was insisting that he was just a private individual who made an account called US-UK Monitoring Service. And
not really. That was the best. Not really. Thank God this is recorded.
He really should have just said no. If he was smart, he just would have said no, and he could have moved on.
He came in here, and the first thing he said was, I mean, the typical Democrat liberal establishment talking point of Donald Trump is bad. I can't believe Americans elected Donald Trump. January 6th was awful, and we watched from Britain in awe or something like that.
And the way that he left and said that we're the reason that Donald Trump
I was like,
president again.
Based.
I don't know why liberals think or whatever their objections are gonna how would you say rub off on people, like you people probably support Donald Trump. Oh my goodness, it's like they think it's like the worst thing.
Did you hear him, or did you just come in a few minutes ago? I was just like, I don't think it's a big deal.
I came in a few minutes ago.
It's not that big of a deal. I don't give a fuck about January 6th. I think I said that. Yeah.
Well, how long are they going to cry about January 6th? Holy shit! It's been like a year. Come on.
I know, it's something that Democrats are bitching about, even today.
We should remember and keep in mind Ashley Babbitt. That's what I take away from January 6th.
Legitimate police brutality. That's what.
I just want to say briefly that this is definitely in part occasioned by the strong effort by Haas, by you, Samirah, and by others to attack the climate hoax. Because that was actually, if I recall correctly, that was one of the very first things that he said, that Trump took the U.S. out of the Paris Accords.
Because I mean, Haas and I have been going really hard on that.
Yeah, he posted this video recently, right, of that professor talking. I just watched that. It was very informative. Thank you for that.
You're welcome. I'll put it up. In the space. But I just want to say briefly that that's clearly a policy priority for the British intelligence services, for the British establishment, and so forth. And if you look at everything else that the guy said, and then consider the way that is approached, it's just everything that we've been advancing on this point is demonstrated clearly. That the people who would advance the notion of CO2 causing a climate crisis crisis demonstrate by their actions, by their arguments, that they don't care at all about the value of a human life. And we need to cast that aside, look at the history of the environmentalist movement, which is absolutely fascist. It goes back to the eugenics movement.
Right.
And recognize this has been a swindle. It's been a disaster over decades that this has been advanced. Mr. LaRouche, Lyndon LaRouche, famously wrote, "There Are No Limits to Growth," which is a wonderful book I recommend people to read, proving that the Malthusian outlook and the neo-Malthusian outlook are completely false. And, I think we're turning a corner right now, because he brought up the COP26 conference and talked about how Biden supported it. That conference was widely considered to be a failure by the people who organized it.
Right.
Because the developing nations refused to go along with with the net zero policy crafted by Mark Carney and all others. And this is a real problem for these guys. What they were hoping over decades was that they could get Russia and China to give in to a policy of zero growth and economic disintegration. And of course, they're not doing that. And now there's a completely different current in the world that is dominant, coming from the BRICS Plus in general and the Shanghai Cooperation Organization. So if we could cause people in the United States who are willing to take political leadership to acknowledge that this is a complete fraud, and then to fight for, just say briefly one further thing, to fight for the economic development of the world. The problem with the right-wing people who are called climate deniers who don't buy this stuff is that they are not passionate about the economic development of Africa. And we have to cause that shift to happen. You notice how I got attacked by a bunch of anime profile pic Nazis because I was calling for the development of Africa. I think this is a central point and can cause a big change.
Okay. That same thing happened to me because I voiced support for a pipeline in Africa. I think it was the East African crude oil pipeline. And I got attacked by a bunch of anime profile pictures and faceless accounts. I mean, there's definitely something behind this. I think you're onto something here.
That's actually how I was recently banned. I don't know why, but
we had a discussion about climate change yesterday in our space, right?
I think we did.
Yeah, and then you got banned right after that, correct?
Yeah, but over the course of the past several days before my ban, I had several of my posts. I don't know how many of you may have noticed this, but several of my posts were getting brigaded by anime profile picture, white nationalists, like
it's the NAFO people.
It's such a weird a weird niche. Like, where are these people?
Yeah, who are these people? I've seen them too. It's bizarre. They're like
Reddit
keto anime pics, and then they're just posting memes about racist memes and shit.
It's just like, where are these people rallying from? Like, where do they come from?
We have a clue now, because now we know that British intelligence cares a lot about it on Twitter. So there are different brigades of British intelligence, also the Pentagon. Absolutely,
it's so embarrassing for them.
Yeah, they create fake profiles and they manage dozens of them at a time.
Accounts.
Exactly, sock puppet accounts.
I've known that. I think Haas and I have been talking about it like deeply. Daniel Burke and I also, this specific topic for a week now. We've been going hard on this, I guess. And ever since then, there's been weird glowy activity.
I think the analogy to eugenics is actually a really good one, because that was another case of liberal progressives using so-called scientific consensus to give legitimacy to these Malthusian policies and views and push them onto society. It's almost one-to-one.
In the modern day and age, science is the new opium of the masses.
Do you have a peer-reviewed study showing that science is opium of the masses? Do you?
It's literally just paganism.
Did I just hear a laugh? I'm sorry. I'm going to need a peer-reviewed study and a fact-check source to say that that's funny, okay?
Oh, the whole aesthetic of these people, like the anime and like all this other really depraved kind of stuff, it's honestly disturbing. It like actually scares me how depraved these people are. And they celebrate it. They don't even like defend themselves. They don't even...
No morals. It's shameless behavior, trolling. Oh, they're vile.
If you want proof that modern America is in a state of national depravity, go on YouTube and look up Walmart morning chant. I warn you, it's fairly disturbing.
It's like they've got like an army. They're building like an army of weeaboo crackheads. It's so weird.
They're just nihilists. They're just these nihilists who were rejected by society and are kind of lashing out at it any way they can.
Did you guys see that furry? I saw something about a furry getting beat up. I thought that was pretty funny.
Thank God.
They're an oppressed class.
You know they're going to take you seriously when you say that. That's the funny thing.
But liberals and like socialists are actually do say this. They actually believe that if
really,
I think they should be. I don't think they should be an oppressed class. I think they should be a non-existent entity. Like that thing shouldn't exist.
How, if you ruled over your own country and there were furries, how would you handle that?
قاتل.
I'm sorry.
يعني يعجب عليهم القاتل ما هذا.
Oh my God. Can you translate that for the?
Are you okay with me translating it?
I don't know if that would be allowed.
Yeah.
So are you okay or not okay with me translating it?
Hey, was that? Am I living on the same timeline or am I just completely crazy? Don't answer that. But did you guys see that there was furries like hanging around playgrounds a couple years ago?
Of course. Yeah, exactly.
I'm sure it's happened.
Let's just say, let me explain. The most extreme punishment in the criminal justice system, I guess. Let's just go with that. If you
the best punishment.
Yeah.
I have an answer too, from my view,
sure.
Which is that this is an effect of a decades-long collapse of the culture. If you look at the introduction of the reason I attack video games and anime so hard and together is that you have an introduction of a mode of mental existence that an increasing number of people are being thrown into that is expressed in these particular activities and others, in which the actual ability to communicate ideas, human ideas, is being radically destroyed, and therefore also the ability to look at another person as a human being. The consequences in the society of the fact that this society and economy has been organized according to Jeremy Bentham's hedonistic calculus, right? Where you say to people, well, your life is only about pleasure and pain. And so we should calculate for you how to maximize your pleasure and minimize your pain. That's why you see these videos from Philadelphia of people on heroin, just trying to somehow, get through the day in the midst of a complete and utter collapse of society. There's a logic to the society that we're living in right now that addresses people from that standpoint and encourages people to think of themselves that way and to look at their fellow man that way. And so LaRouche warned, 20 years ago that 25 years ago, that Harry Potter and Pokemon were a leading expression of this and would create a society that would generate, or were expressions of a society. People sometimes misunderstand me, but they're expressions of a society that will generate child terrorists, which is what we deal with nowadays.
Yeah, video games are a complete psyop. I'm very anti making video games your entire personality. I think it's very NPC.
Halo's okay though. Halo's a good game.
The thing is, I kind of agree and also disagree. I think video games are a part of the problem, but they're not the root, right? They're not necessarily the root. Like, if we want to take a deep analysis into this, in my view, the social crisis, which I call it, I think it goes all the way back to the 50s with the start of, suburbanization and people just seeing less people in public, right? For example, houses start getting further and further apart and like cookie cutter houses and stuff, right? Or public transportation starts not really becoming a thing in the United States, at least. I'm talking about the United States. And for example, things such as like mom and pop shops where people meet and greet people, or kind of like this kind of bizarre culture, right? Which is a thing across most of history and across most of the world, from India to Russia to Iran to Pakistan. There's like this kind of public culture where people meet and greet, they do business, everything, see people in public. That kind of has been completely eroded in America for the last several decades as modernity takes like a more and more advanced form, right?
Yeah, and then anxiety, and then they term that as anxiety, right?
These people, in a way, they become more and more asocial, and to escape that, they use these kinds of methods, such as video games, right, to kind of, pass their time, and that kind of, in a way, that's like a snowball effect. That's how I see it.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think somehow these forms of media consumption, as well as like the online subcultures and communities that develop around them, have created a kind of almost a pipeline of disaffected young people who, are disillusioned, disaffected for the reasons that you've said about changes in the culture, of funneling them into more extreme and kind of antisocial environments and milieus and so on.
In my view, something needs to be done. I don't know what, but something needs to be done to make the country less asocial. And if people just get more social, then I think a lot of the problems that we're talking about now would probably disappear.
I think people need to accept the Torah. But yes, that's my position. It's the correct one. But yeah.
Well, I think that one of the ways that we can change the culture is absolutely by establishing a national mission. I mean, it's not unexpected that people, they're demoralized, they're depressed, they're terrified, they don't know what to do. They don't know what to do about their children. Everything seems awful. And if the United States government were able to put this bankrupt financial system through bankruptcy, prevent the crash from destroying the population, and initiate state-directed credit like China does toward mega projects of infrastructure and scientific missions, then people would have, a reason to be proud to be an American again. And that will manifest the kind of social development that I think you're referring to, Prism. In other words, you would create a condition within the factories, within the small businesses that are going to be mobilized, within the leading laboratories, and therefore also in the schools, because we'll actually have something. This is what happened in the 1960s, of course, with the space race, which is, somewhat tainted from the Cold War, but we could do it today from the standpoint of a broader intention. We could revive that tradition, and then people would have a reason to, have some human dignity, which is, I think, being trampled on.
Torah.
Yeah, I agree 100%. 100%. And yeah, like you said, a lot of another contributor is the fact that people kind of they work in these meaningless jobs, like flipping burgers all day, or like all these kinds of fake.
Or Walmart.
Yeah, exactly, like Walmart.
Like I said, Prism, look up, literally, after you're done speaking, look up Walmart morning chant. This is the reason why America is like the new Sodom. But yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I made my point, but yeah, I'll check it out.
This is kind of a change of topic, but I was curious about the climate change stuff you guys were talking about. Can you guys go over that?
Well, I can say something from the standpoint of the Schiller Institute, the LaRouche movement, and myself. It's going to take me a moment, but I will put up this wonderful video, which someone mentioned before, which is by Dr. William Happer. Happer is a he's a professor emeritus at Princeton, physics professor, and he's got a lot of courage, and he's just trying to demonstrate to you in this lecture, which is about 1 hour, in a short amount of time, how it is that we can double CO2 and it will not increase the temperature of the atmosphere to any significant degree, really a tiny, tiny amount. So I invite you to watch it and to see what you think from him. And then I want you can also look at the other article that I posted here, How the British Turned Genocide and Race Science Green, which includes this crucial quote. If you open it up, you can read with me. The conclusion of the article quotes from a 1991 document called The First Global Revolution, which was written by the Club of Rome, a leading society of European oligarchs primarily. And it says, in searching for a new enemy to unite us, we came up with the idea that pollution, the threat of global warming, water shortages, famine, and the like would fit the bill. But in designating them as the enemy, we fall into the trap of mistaking symptoms for causes. All these dangers are caused by human intervention, and it is only through changed attitudes and behavior that they can be overcome. The real enemy, then, is humanity itself. So that gives you a good idea of what the people who are advocating this view of things believe.
I'm sorry, Daniel, to interrupt. Who was it who said that quote that you just read out?
You can find it in the second tweet that's featured at the top, and it's from the Club of Rome's 1991 document titled The First Global Revolution. So just briefly, go ahead.
Oh, I just said I've heard of the Club of Rome. They kind of started this idea that too much production and so on, we're gonna run out of agriculture. We're gonna run out of everything, and so there's problems with the population levels. So
they were responsible for publishing the book that was written by Forrester and Meadows, who were MIT professors. In 1971, they published this book called The Limits to Growth, in which they developed this whole complex model with a bunch of feedback loops about the development of the human economy in the world. And in this book, they argue that human economic activity will necessarily bring about a collapse because of the using up of resources and the creation of pollution. But as part of their model, one of the presumptions that led them to that conclusion was that there was no fundamental breakthroughs in science and technology. So anyone who is reasonable would say, oh my God, this is a really important reason for us to massively increase science and technology so that we can break past these limits. And of course, that's not actually why they wrote the book, not because they're looking for truth, but because they represent a faction of people who would like to cause humanity to go back into some kind of a, feudal circumstance with perhaps 1 billion people living, and just see the mass destruction of human beings all across the world through a system of financial austerity and looting that's modeled on the Roman Empire or the continuation of the British East India Company. That's our thesis, and I think it's well demonstrated.
It's kind of the same philosophy behind the stuff that was written on the Georgia Guidestones, which someone tried to blow up recently. It's kind of funny.
Yeah, that's true. That's some kind of artifact of this kind of way of thinking about it. But anyway, just to be more to the point, this process was created. The IPCC, anytime that you see something in the news about climate models, it's the IPCC. Look at the history of climate models. They've been wrong over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. There's no reason to believe them at all, because all of them are based on fraudulent approaches to it, which is demonstrated by what the IPCC has done. They have completely left out of their reports the role of the sun. Anyone who's looking at the solar system and wondering why is weather the way it is, why are the climates of Jupiter and of Earth and of Venus the way that they are, is going to look at the sun, which is the most important factor in the solar system. And yet, the proposals about the role of solar activity are not included. Neither are the hypotheses that have to do with the role of galactic radiation in causing cloud cover. Because, as you'll learn from Dr. Happer in the video, the role of clouds is gigantic. We talk about the greenhouse gas effect. Well, think about the reflective capability of clouds and the fact that when the cloud goes overhead, you don't get the sun on the ground. So when the cloud cover increases, the temperature reduces. When the cloud cover reduces, the temperature increases. And certain scientists, like for example, a guy named Lindzen and a number of other people, Svensmark in Denmark, have demonstrated an hypothesis that this is controlled by galactic radiation. The creation of clouds, the ionization that takes place has to do with the radiation that is passing in from outside of the solar system. So these are some of the hypotheses that are not allowed to be cited in the IPCC report because it is a political effort to try to carry out this Malthusian agenda.
Cool. Sorry, just a bit more questions. Is the melting of because you do agree that the Earth is heating up currently. Is that a fair statement?
If you would like to provide me with something that you're to what degree? What do you mean heating up? How much?
Just in general, it's you're reaching record highs in recorded history, on global heat, that type of thing.
I'd have to look into those to know whether I think that they're actually legitimate. There's specific things that you're referring to. There's been a lot of lying about these things, which has been cited, for example, in the ClimateGate emails that came out some time ago. You can easily investigate the way that there have been frauds perpetrated.
I think the temperature has gone up a couple degrees in recent history, but it's not the hottest it's been in human history. But I could be wrong about that.
Mar, do you have this?
Yes, hello?
Or at least CO2 levels, that's true.
Can you hear
it's
me?
not the highest CO2 levels have been.
Yeah, here you are.
Is there something you need?
Yeah. Do you have a take on this? Whether the planet is, that was the question.
Whether the planet is what?
Heating up.
Like I said, like, here's the thing. I said this in the last space that, like, look, the temperature of the Earth and of itself with regards to heat and coolness fluctuates just based on region and fluctuates in every single generation. What the reason why people keep assuming, right, that the planet is only consistently heating up and becoming hotter and so on and so forth is based off of, for example, these sorts of studies which people blindly cling to. The problem is that if you observe these sorts of studies, you'll find that there's many times in which they either inadvertently or purposely skew the numbers to only observe specific regions of the world that are affected, right? Or at one interval, and then another period of time, they'll observe other regions of the world, right? And basically, or other regions of the world that are hotter than most others at the time, and they'll conclude from this saying, oh, look, the planet is consistently heating up at a global scale instead of saying, okay, in some areas, right, at certain intervals and periods of time, these places become hotter than other places and so on and so forth. Instead of saying that it's at a regional level, they say it's at a global level. So this is kind of what happened as well with the whole thing of the drought in South Africa, right? For example, they said, right, oh, there's going to be this drought in South Africa, right, and it's going to be, they were saying that they were pushing that this is going to be a permanent thing unless climate change is fixed and so on and so forth, to the point where South Africans are going to have to draw their fresh drinking water from other sources, from foreign sources and imports and so on and so forth. The problem is that the rate at which they suggested, for example, the South Africa drought to catch up to them and basically remove all their drinking water was in a matter of, I think it was in a matter of 7 years or so. The thing is, though, is that they've actually decreased, or the actual rate of their water sources drying up has decreased, and many of their freshwater sources have actually successfully replenished. And this has nothing to do with some sort of fixture that people made, for example, to climate change in South Africa. Rather, it's literally just because of the fact of the natural progression of time. Secondly, another thing that attested this, right, is that you can even find all the way back in the 50s and the 40s, people were, for example, discussing, right, how South Africa was going through an almost, and then at another, over a few decades, right, over a decade and a half, and then the next decade and a half, they would see that these water resources were replenished. This is when, the time of Rhodesia and the time of, apartheid South Africa and so on and so forth. The same thing also happened, like I said, in the Zimbabwe region when Rhodesia was active there. And and then also the idea of they say also rising sea levels as well because of ice caps melting in Antarctica.
Yeah, they'll even say things like, oh, Bangladesh is going to be underwater, but the truth is it's actually gaining more territory. It's not safe. Yeah. So, there's little examples like that.
So for temperature, I saw in the video that Daniel, some plots of the actual rise, and that Daniel posted some plots of the rise in temperature. And it was something like a tenth of the rate of increase as was predicted by the models that the IPCC and so on are putting out. So it is rising, but not at a significant level from the data that I have seen.
So what do you attribute that rise of temperature to? Because you said the average temperature of the Earth does go kind of up and down, but it does, the graphs of CO2 concentration within the atmosphere, it seems to kind of follow that. And I'm seeing graphs of CO2 concentration in the atmosphere, and it's off the fucking charts. I don't really know how to argue that.
There's a question of what the degree of effect the CO2 concentration has on the temperature. So say doubling the CO2 in the currently atmosphere increases the global temperature by half of a degree. Well, that means we could keep pumping out CO2 for 100 years, but the temperature rise will not be very significant. So the numbers actually matter here.
I would also say, just briefly, that there is a question of, is it the case that temperature follows CO2, or is it the case that CO2 follows temperature? But go on. You're going to have to dig into it.
Sorry, I'm reading your thing. I'm honestly just curious.
I think even if the temperatures are increasing at some nominal level, it's nowhere near enough to justify upturning the economy of the entire world and preventing countries from developing their productive forces and so on. You're dooming billions of people to poverty and starvation and so on for...
Look, it's not even just development. A lot of the stuff, even as well as with vehicular, with the usage of vehicles and travel and so on and so forth, right? For example, they want to institute in Europe this policy, and many European countries are already trying to move towards it, France, where they're trying to make people use their cars as little as possible, and that you can be fined, for example, for a certain degree of a certain amount of time to drive your car. The thing in certain areas of France, which is Paris, the thing is, right, is that if you want a complete global economic collapse, you will take people's ability to drive to work away. Look, if you, I said, go ahead if you want that, but that's simply what's going to happen. There are plenty of people in very high-paying jobs, very high high-paying positions, who they live an hour, 2 hours, and so on and so forth away from their workplace, right? And even just in general, right? Many people actually have to travel for their work and so on and so forth by car and not by plane. What you're going to find is that you will literally see people just absolutely be out of a job, unable to work, markets collapsing, economy collapsing, and so on and so forth. And yeah, another thing as well, by the way, is how they argue about the rising sea levels. Like, so the thing is that once again, the problem that they don't accept, and most of these people who just blindly believe in this, climate change lie accept, right, is that they believe that that basically there's a global rise, for example, in sea level because of the fact that there's melting ice caps, right, in Australia. So not in Australia, I'm sorry, Antarctica. Now the thing is, right, is that once again, this is another issue of where they only sample some regional instances and they don't sample others, and then they alternate between regions and basically say, oh, this is a global phenomenon. You can observe, right, the sea levels in different regions around the world, and you can find that some have raised, some have lowered, and some have remained the same this whole time. Now, the thing is that they, for example, with island nations, right, with island nations, they say, oh, look, these people have to sell their houses and move, all their houses are going to be underwater and so on. What they don't listen to at all is that even historically in that region, there have been hurricanes there. They've been affected by there have been hurricanes there. Their sea levels in that part of the world specifically fluctuates also as a result of it. Whereas in other parts of the world, right, you don't see, for example, sea levels fluctuating so much one way or the other because the fact that they have, calmer climate. But no, there's not this global rise, right, in sea level or whatever it is because of, ice caps melting in Antarctica causing the whole world to be submerged underwater. It just does not exist. But yeah.
Absolutely. Go ahead, Boris. Excuse me.
No, I was just wondering if anyone knew how fast the temperature was rising, because I think wouldn't that matter?
Well, I think go ahead and look into it. You can watch the video, and Dr. Happer gives his figures, and by all means investigate others and see how they approach it. But you have to think about it. Can we address the reality here, which is that we're not going to sacrifice development. Xi Jinping gave the speech, the keynote speech at the Davos Forum, and he said something that was interesting. He used a Chinese proverb, which I can't reproduce at the moment, to say that if you sacrifice the environment for development, then, I remember, he said it's like draining a pond to catch a fish. But if you sacrifice development on behalf of the environment or your environmental concerns, then it's like climbing a tree to catch a fish. It's ridiculous. It's completely absurd. So if we want to ensure that we have clean water, that we have clean air, that we have a continually improving biosphere, then humanity must intervene with increasing power, as measured, for example, in energy flux density. We need to have fission and fusion. We need to wield these abilities, thermonuclear fusion, which should be, something that we should be fighting for. In China, there's tremendous effort towards breaking through on fusion, and there actually have been very significant developments in different parts of the world in that direction recently, including one in Britain, in fact. But we could, if we can bring those abilities to bear on developing the entire globe and developing humanity, then we're going to have a ton of problems that we're going to solve. So part of what they're doing to you is convincing you that humanity cannot solve problems but can only create them. And that is a completely anti-human, outrageous belief that has no grounding in fact.
Yeah, historically, the history of science, technology, etc., has been about humanity gaining greater control over the natural elements and over nature. And the extent to which humanity is kind of living at the whims of nature, whether a hurricane is going to kill us, whether a forest fire is going to destroy us, or whether we can actually do something about it. That depends on development, on the development of technologies and the development of society, right? So if we're trading one for the other, it's a dangerous game. You have to ask whether more technology, whether more industry, and so on can actually, even if the climate is going to shit, can actually protect us from this happening.
I'm going to change the topic of the space real quick. I wanted to know your thoughts on before big tech cracks down on the monkeypox issue, because they're talking about lockdowns. They want to go back to a, let's just say, pandemic state. I think that's going to make the economy worse, of course, right? What's your take?
This is the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. That's my take.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say the economy is not contingent. I will say this though: the economy is not contingent on a group of people that make up less than 1% of the population. That is the majority of monkeypox infections belong to this specific group.
They want to stop everything.
Honestly, the deep state isn't that smart. They're not smart at all. Earlier, that guy said he works as a spy, maybe a little bit, and now they're calling this virus the monkeypox. These people aren't smart. They're not smart at all.
It just sounds like bullshit to me. I don't know if anyone, aside from like the most hysterical liberals, has fallen for it.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's refreshing. But the thing is, they're saying that Biden is going to declare a public health emergency. And if that happens, then that makes the case for more lockdowns. I mean, they're already calling for lockdowns now. So I don't know. And they're saying we need to crack down on monkeypox disinformation. So that's why I wanted to get this topic out there before it gets...
If that's true, then I think that would be like the best evidence of controlled demolition of the economy that I've heard of so far. Yeah. I mean, at least COVID was, no one could argue that lots of people got it. Maybe you can quibble around how effective the measures we took were against that. But monkeypox, I mean, come on.
Yeah, that's what the World Health Organization was saying, that we need big tech to take action. And then Biden, let's see what happens tomorrow morning. I mean, who knows?
Do you want, how do you want the government to respond to monkeypox?
I don't think the government has to respond to monkeypox. I don't think that it's that big of an issue.
Would you be willing to allocate resources towards a vaccine for it, or not even help out at all?
I do know that Biden has something like 800K doses ready, so whoever needs it. I mean, I just don't think that there needs to be a federal response.
I have a prediction, by the way. Watch the media within the next few months or so. Okay, either next few weeks or next few months. I want you to pay attention to the media trying to push, for example, the number. They're going to interview people with monkeypox, or they're going to put something up, for example, trying to push the idea of prevalent cases of monkeypox among heterosexual males or heterosexual females.
They're already doing that.
They're already doing that?
Yeah.
Okay, because the moment they start doing that, that's when that's the moment they try to use monkeypox as an excuse to say, oh, we're in a pandemic again. We are in a pandemic. We're in the middle of a pandemic right now. Why aren't you wearing your mask? Oh my God.
Mark, just type in monkeypox in the Twitter search bar, and you'll see it's like they're going insane.
Yeah.
And that's why I wanted to bring it up. We might not be able to talk about this in the next week or so. If you guys remember when Russia first intervened in Ukraine, Jackson and I were doing a bunch of Twitter spaces, and all of them were shut down, because of disinformation. So I wanted to talk about this before.
Yeah. What is it with these obvious bot accounts? 1.6 million impressions on some of these obvious robots. Over 3,000 cases of monkeypox in the United States, and we still have not shut down? Yeah, no, of course not. What are you talking about? Why would you shut down over 3,000 cases? That is not a pandemic. Are you?
Yeah, I posted a map earlier today of where all of the cases were concentrated in, mostly Spain, Germany, Western countries, the U.S. Then I put the upside down face emoji because I can't talk about anything openly on this website, you see? Hold on, let me post it. Super interesting. I'm just, I'm not...
Yeah, they indoctrinated people. Yeah, nobody's going to shut down over 3,000 cases. The hell you're talking about?
What even is monkeypox? I mean, is it a very deadly disease, the way they were saying COVID was? Or
you didn't see the article? You didn't see the article of the executive or director of the World Economic Forum? I don't know. He wrote up an op-ed about dealing with monkeypox and the symptoms. Sounds pretty fucking disgusting.
I'll definitely look that.
The monkeypox thing is really interesting because the whole rhetoric around COVID is how we can't go to restaurants because 83-year-olds might die. But any discourse that says maybe don't go to orgies is now really homophobic. It's really insane how there's an expectation standards for everyone else for this one disease. But then this one that offends one of the partisan groups of the new Democratic Party or whatever. Now we have to we have to be very caring and very kind. We have to let them cook. But I think I have a more right to go to a bar as does everybody else than these people get to have orgies if they're spreading.
Nobody's saying, look.
Yeah, we can't go to a bar. I can't go get yucky with the boys, and these guys are going to bathhouses with I don't know what's going on, man.
Look, here's the thing, right? Homosexuals make up less than 1% of the population in every single country. Okay, every single country there's less than a 1% homosexual population, at least to my knowledge. The thing is that as a result of this, combine that number of people, that proportion of number of people, with the culture that exists in Western homosexuality, which is bathhouses, orgies, and so on and so forth, a very big connection to sexual encounters, like, having multiple sex partners more than the average person. I can post a few surveys on this if I can find them again. I think it's something like the average gay man in the United States and Canada has several dozen sex partners per year. Combine that with the actual proportion of the population.
Nothing wrong with getting it done. Just don't do it.
Let me finish. Right. Combine that with the proportion of, for example, people, right, in the homosexual population, right, who are also having extreme promiscuous sex. The problem is, what you notice is that it's mostly prevalent among that specific group of people. Second, so the average, for example, there's no, among heterosexuals, right, the prevalent number of heterosexuals are not usually going to bathhouses and orgies and sleeping with each other, right, all the time, or whatever, having multitudes upon multitudes of sex partners, year, month, going to orgies, doing very gross things. There are many millions of heterosexual people who do this, but the ratio between heterosexuals who don't do it and heterosexuals who do it is much, much, much more lower than that. And it is much lower than that of, for example, existing in the homosexual population, simply because the heterosexual population is much higher. Secondly, should people be banned from going to bathhouses and having orgies? Yes. Whether or not they're heterosexual or they're homosexual, it doesn't matter. They should be banned. That should be banned in the first place.
No. I think that's fine.
No, it should be banned in the first place. That's the first thing, man. However,
because you're like a religious extremist.
It's not extreme. How you should be banned from having an orgy. But anyways,
come on.
No, I stop being a degenerate. Stop being a degenerate and listen to God. So, anyways.
There is no God.
You're
whoa.
Tell you, but you are going to hell. But that's your decision, though.
I hope they serve beer in hell.
I'm sorry, but it is real. Anyways,
yeah, Israel.
So, anyways,
they should make a disease that affects furries.
No, bathhouses and these orgy parties and these sex parties, whatever, whether heterosexual or homosexual, should all be banned. But yeah.
Let me do it, man.
Whatever. No.
Hey, how down bad do you got to be to go to a homosexual orgy?
That's right. I was a slightly different approach to it, but okay. So, actually, I don't know if people want to continue, but I have a little bit of a change of topic, but it's in response to...
I like this monkey virus topic.
Go on. Okay. Well, okay, then I'll just say what I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
I mean, the liberal conception, the liberal conception is you should obey the rules-based order and do what we say, and we're doing this for everyone's benefit. We're doing this for everyone. Like you saw in the Club of Rome statement, that if we're going to unite everyone, obviously they're uniting everyone around the rules-based order, around a unipolar neoliberal system. That system is crashing. It's falling apart. But if you want to change the fact that this is happening and the way that people are responding to it, I don't disagree with some of the points being made. Some of them I don't agree with. But in general, I think that what we have to do is we have to get people to think about where is the next real pandemic going to come from? Because the fact is that it is entirely possible that there is going to be a disease that is far worse than COVID, going to spread as rapidly as COVID did. And the reason for that is that you've got the continent of Africa and many other locations are being plunged into a disastrous poverty far worse than before. Look at South America too. The July inflation rate in Argentina is 64%. So I won't go on too much, but there are many nations that are just falling apart, including because of this vicious food inflation. And that's where you're going to get diseases, is from the fact that people are living in increasingly disastrous, situations.
Thank you. I am actually going to open the floor to, whoever wants to speak. Let it be a free-for-all. Okay.
Ryan has his hand up.
So I have a question I want to pose to y'all real quick. We were talking earlier about kind of the globalist and the green agenda stuff that is anti-humanity, which of course it's all true. Here's the thing that I can't understand, though, and I can understand it maybe from a psychological perspective, but there seems to be literally no strategic thinking going on because, okay, you have this Club of Rome anti-human agenda. If you're Adelina Braubach or whatever, you only have access to Germany, so you start deindustrializing Germany. But if you actually want to fulfill these plans, you have to do this to everybody, or else you're just going to destroy the economies where you have power, and then you destroy your own power base, and then everybody else is going to merrily go on their way and ignore you or kill you. So what seems to be happening is, they kind of pushing all this stuff in the deindustrialization of Germany. Meanwhile, you have China and Russia and the rest of the BRICS actually economically rising to the point where they can challenge the United States and the rest of the liberal world order. And it seems to me that all this is going to actually be able to do is just destroy economically the liberal world order so that it can never recover. And that it's surpassed by others, and then these people will probably lose power, or at least potentially lose power, because they won't be able to. People will be mad at them, whether that's voting them out of office or things get bad enough that people start thinking of using other means. So I don't see how there's any kind of strategy that this is working, and you see this still being pushed forward, and I don't understand it. I'm curious if any of you have any theory as to why they're pushing this, even when it seems to be so self-destructive.
Are you asking, sorry, just to get some clarification, Triumph, are you asking why they're pushing this green energy initiative?
Well, I can understand the Club of Rome Malthusian thing, but when you're pushing something so obviously unpopular, not at home, but also something so obviously self-destructive in the face of opposition from other systems that aren't destroying themselves this way, it seems that for simple self-preservation, you would try to lay off and hold back on some of this stuff, at least until you were in a better position vis-a-vis the rest of the world. So you don't just
see what you're saying.
Lose power.
I think
they know this.
I think part of it is to destabilize the power of the American people, which is why they're pushing, or not pushing, which is why they're staging all these mass shootings. They want to take away the guns from the people. I know it sounds crazy. I don't know if anybody here is anti.
Nah, because think about it.
Does not sound crazy.
It does not, because look, I think they fundamentally know that they're not going to last any longer, and all the policies that they're pushing seem like they're just gearing us up for war with China, getting away guns, a heavier police state, low wage, so all we got to do is just work, and this the destruction of food facilities, so people need rations, and you can hold food above people's heads. So either you could be like, hey, if you join the military, you'll get more food for your family type stuff, and then you just end up going to war with China because that's the only way they could save their economy due to the amount of capital that China has built. If they get access to it to destroy it or to do whatever with it,
I think there's definitely
more years.
I think there's definitely truth to that. Like, the strategy is clearly not to outdevelop or outproduce these other systems. I mean, the strategy is to destroy them.
Well, I think the strategy was to gain economic control of the world and then to do this to everybody all at once. But this long-term strategic thinking does not seem to have adjusted at all for the fact that they lost Russia and China, and now they're losing the rest of the global south because Russia and China form an alternative.
What they want to do, Triumph, I think, is that they want to implement what China has going on there, which is the social capital system, right? China, the population is, like, sorry to say it, but like very NPC, right? They all conform, and the U.S. wants to kind of implement the same.
That is not true.
That is absolutely not true. Also, I will say about that, the social capital system has actually a fair amount of precedent in the West. If you go read Justinian's law code, which is the foundation of Western law, there is something in there called an infamia that's basically exactly the same thing that you have with some of the social credit system stuff as it's actually implemented in China.
I think you guys misunderstood. What I meant to say is that China, the population, is unarmed, right? And the United States is, or the people in power, they want to have total control of the population. So I think this all ties into that.
Well, but I mean, in China, and I don't want to go off the rails here, but China's got a government that's fundamentally more responsive to people's needs. So I mean, like, it's I think a lot of Westerners kind of paper over, project the spiteful insanity of our own elites on China and it doesn't really line up to reality to dig into China enough. But that's kind of a different topic.
I want to be more forcefully like pro-China because I think
Samirah,
the Belt and Road Initiative and everything is very good.
Let me pipe, Samirah.
Why is China being so fucking annoying about COVID? Like the zero COVID policy is fucking madness. It's so stupid.
They're just flexing. They're flexing muscle, right? They're flexing their muscle of how they can control the populace.
No, that's not what it is. It's that they care about
society.
Yeah, they care about human life in China, and because they have a economy that is developing, where they're actually increasing their productive capabilities constantly, and they view their economy from a physical standpoint in terms of how much it is physically producing and how that rate is increasing, they can deal with this kind of problem.
I think Xiangyu should speak on this since he's know more about China. But Daniel, you're right.
I don't know, man. There's just something about disease is part of life. I mean, I don't want to sound like my grandpa, but I remember when I was a kid, I used to fake sick all the time to get out of school, and my grandpa would say, "Just walk it off, just walk it off." And I always thought he was this bitter, annoying asshole. But as I get older, just fucking walk it off.
I think Triumph is right in this case about kind of projection of the circumstances in the U.S. to China, because I mean, obviously the COVID response in the U.S. was against the will of the people in the U.S., or at least many of them. I don't believe it's the same case in China. In China, there weren't huge protests and against the lockdowns and so on, and a lot of it, I believe, was not top down. A lot of it was local communities deciding on how to handle the issue. But of course, if anyone knows more,
and they have no vax mandate, so that
you
they get a point. They get a point in my book.
You can't compare the lockdowns in China to the ones in the United States, because the way that China does it is scientific. Okay, there is an outbreak in a community. Okay, we lock down this community and prevent it from spreading everywhere else. And as soon as it's possible, you get rid of the lockdown and life resumes to normal. And that's been the case since the start of COVID in 2020. Now, there are many reasons for this. One is, I guess it's projecting the will of projecting the capability of China to get things done. China doesn't take no for an answer. When it wants something done, it gets done. And the other factor is, the hospital bed to patient ratio is a lot lower in China than it is in America. So especially when COVID first began, if these measures weren't taken, then it could have seriously, if a lot of people died from COVID due to mismanagement, then that could have very severely harmed the reputation of the party. Now, are they probably going to lift the restrictions? At this point, probably after the 20th Congress, that's coming up soon. But other than that, life is pretty normal. Okay, tourists, foreigners can't get into China. If they get into China, they have to quarantine for, if you are there on a non-tourist visa and you have to enter the mainland, you have to get, you have to quarantine for 2 to 3 weeks. But there's also no vaccine mandate, and most of the people who are not vaccinated in China are elderly people who are more vulnerable to the virus. So I mean, are the Chinese people complaining? No, and that's really, for the most part, no, and that's really all that's relevant. What people outside of China think about zero COVID is really irrelevant. I think the thing that Westerners get wrong about China is that China has a long history of trying to rule its people. There's a whole history here that most people don't know. But the point is, they've been doing this for a very, very long time. And one of the things that they understand, I mean, for example, somebody was saying that Chinese people are sheep. That's blatantly untrue. And 10 minutes of looking at the warlord period will tell you this.
China's banning video games, so I support that. That makes up for the bullshit no COVID shit.
Well, but I mean, something people don't understand about this, I think, is that China, to try to achieve a legitimately good end, is willing to do things to its population that in the West would only ever be done by an insane tyrant who wanted to hurt people. But in China, it's just a different context. One of the other contexts I've heard about some of the more recent lockdown stuff in Shanghai, for example, is they're potentially preparing a bunch of restrictions they're going to have to implement if they end up in a war with the U.S.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but are you petting your dog or something? There's something rattling. It's really annoying.
I am not. Is it still happening?
No, you're good.
I think my mic was probably rubbing on my shirt as I was pacing. Sorry about that. Is this better?
Yeah, much better.
But to Triumph's original question about kind of the long-term strategy of Western elites, I mean, I think that there's clearly conflict brewing. I mean, the areas that you're talking about that are outside of the system, like Russia, China, even Iran, Venezuela, and so on, there's the sanctions, and there's obviously almost intentional gear up towards war towards these countries. So even if in the long term, in kind of a hypothetical universe without conflict between the Western unipolar order and the rest of the world, if those countries would have outproduced and outpaced the West, in reality, I think it's very likely that they'll come to a military conflict. I mean, that's maybe the strategy.
Well, but then all the actions we're taking are weakening our ability to compete in a military conflict. So I
don't think there's no military conflict on the bingo board. That's not going to happen. The United States is trying to implement the Chinese system in a way that seems democratic.
No, the U.S. is definitely not trying to implement the Chinese system in a way that seems democratic. That would be base though. But it's what it's implementing is the straw man that people have of the Chinese system onto the American populace. That's what it is. It's the straw man of it. It's not what it actually. No.
Let's be mindful not to give the haughty bourgeoisie credits they don't deserve. I mean, they are freaking out. Their whole system is collapsing around them rapidly. And you look at just the policies of the Joe Biden administration in general, right? Everything this man does and the people around him do right now is just betrays their own incompetence.
Love to see it.
So
that's what people have to realize, that there's like a level of like, don't attribute to intention what can also be described by incompetence. And we have very incompetent elites in the West. We're not dealing with Alan Dulles. We're not dealing with like high modern American Anglo order. We're dealing with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden and these like theater kids who are running the State Department. Like they're not sending their best,
I mean, they're not sending their best, but the problem with that thesis is that they write books about their malice. They record their malicious intent in the books. They're just apparently very bad at actually achieving it, especially in this current generation.
Of course they are. Yeah.
I love how you said theater kids.
I'd like to respond to Triumph briefly.
My pronouns are she, her. I'm a woman in a blue suit sitting at a table.
Okay, so I have a brief response. What you're raising, in my view, has to do with the issue of failed axioms. You can appropriately ask, why are these people doing something that cannot possibly yield a good outcome for them? Because I would agree with you in that regard. It is suicidal. And what do they expect is going to proceed? What's going to follow from this circumstance? Only nuclear war could follow if they really stick to their principles, right? Because that is what they would actually like would be to back down Russia and China and force them through some kind of a war to accept a defeat. But as you pointed out, I think very much accurately, that kind of military success is impossible. And so this is the kind of tension that we're living in. I believe that the reason that we're living in that tension is that the fundamental presumptions of the people who have organized this strategy, if you go to Samuel Huntington, if you go to Zbigniew Brzezinski, if you go to Henry Kissinger and associated figures, they believe in the theories of Mackinder. They believe in geopolitics. They believe that it is necessary and possible to direct the pathway of human development according to the manipulation of the interests of nations against each other, because they believe that it is impossible for there to be such a thing as a common interest, a common principle, a mutual benefit for humanity. They simply do not accept that. In their worldview, it doesn't exist because they live in a world that's run by Satan. And they think that the way that you can win is to be the most satanic person. For example, look at Mike Pompeo. Remember what he did when he killed Soleimani? The whole logic of deterrence is that you have to be, the most evil person that you possibly can be, or state that you can be. And that's the only way to keep other evil in check. So it's a Hobbesian world of each against all. This has been completely demonstrated to be a failure in a couple of crucial examples. One of them would be Africa. Of course, what's happening is that China is going into Africa and they're building and they're building and they're building. They're building hospitals, schools, they're building high-speed trains, they're building power systems, water systems, and they're doing it in a way that is respectful of the interests of the, of the governments, of the political systems, of the population. In large majority, it's being done with African, with labor from people in those nations. And meanwhile, what does the U.S. do? My friend Hussein Askari told a good story about this, that Rex Tillerman, the kind of thing that he was doing was to arrive at an airport that China built and ride in a car on a highway that China built to an African governmental building and lecture them on how they shouldn't go with China. It's not going to work. They don't have anything to offer. So just to briefly complete this, the crucial conception that has shifted things is expressed by Xi Jinping in the idea of a shared community of destiny for mankind. Because this, which is also coherent with the ideas of win-win or and so forth, this is a different conception which is not based on geopolitics. It's based on a profound fundamental belief, which I believe is most appropriately expressed as Confucian, and is most clearly drawn from Confucius, that demonstrates a belief that humanity can act in harmony for the benefit of everyone.
I have never heard that put so well. I share a lot of your thoughts, but that was very good. One point I also want to rebut you, kind of semi-related, which is I think part of the problem here is the ideology of the West itself. Because one of the three slogans of the French Revolution, the one that liberalism, especially in American form, embraced, was liberté, freedom. And I think the real problem with this is, okay, maybe if it's against a tyrannical ruler or against taxes or whatever, you can argue whether or not freedom in that case is a good thing. But when freedom is not a good thing, is because, of course, your free will comes to you through your human nature and is constrained by what's proper to and good for your human nature to partake in. This is something the Founding Fathers obviously understood, and people like Adams talking about you need a moral society to have freedom. And what we've seen in our day is that what this has morphed into is that people want freedom from the limits of their own human nature and freedom from consequence, freedom to, it's almost like this, I want to become pure act or something, right? And so I'm going to go do things that are obviously against my own human nature. I'm going to live in a delusion bubble and create a delusion bubble that says, and that nobody can infringe upon my delusion bubble. That's what freedom has become to mean in our day. And I think that's it leads to a delusional leadership class that loses wars, that mismanages economies. And it's a tragic disaster because it destroys human community in the population. And so you end up with, people huddling in drug addict camps next to school bus stops.
I definitely agree that there are different conceptions of freedom, and they develop over time. I mean, there's the kind of very basic conception of I am an individual atom who can just do whatever he wants, and any constraints on my behavior whatsoever is unjust tyranny. And there's other conceptions of freedom, like I think Engels, paraphrasing Hegel, said freedom is insight into necessity. So freedom is knowing what is necessary and understanding the world as it is and being able to act in accordance with it, as opposed to being able to just do whatever you want, right? So there are different conceptions of freedom.
I mean, from my own view of freedom is that freedom is, of course, that freedom which you actually have to choose to act, and that's mostly self-limited, because this is a classical view of freedom that's been completely abandoned in the West in favor of, well, I'll put it this way. I think the delusion bubble starts with the boomers. I don't think it's a coincidence that the people making delusional decisions and pushing and presiding over the victory in the culture of delusional ways of living is, it's being presided over by boomer leadership. I don't think that's coincidence.
I just wanted to delve into partisan politics. Sorry for interrupting, but the potential for heightened tensions with China, especially over Taiwan. Pelosi, as many of you know, has scheduled a visit to Taiwan. And right now we're seeing the internal contradictions within the U.S. government sort of play out because the Pentagon is opposed to it, but the State Department and the intelligence apparatus, along with, this global network of NGOs that they use to further their agenda, they're completely on board. So I feel like right now it's just the Pentagon that's taking a sane approach. I wanted to know how you guys feel about that. And this is for everyone. So no need to raise your hand. Just go ahead.
Probably just like a PR thing. I think the Pentagon's against it because they're the one, they care more about national security than PR, and Pelosi is going to Taiwan and be like, free go.
I think there's, I've even heard it in this chat that there are people who actually believe that any kind of war developing is not possible, that it's outside the bounds of possibility, maybe because it's so unimaginable and horrific, the idea that there would actually be a war between like China and the US. But the actual military thinkers understand that it's not impossible, that China has limits, and if we cross them, they'll respond. Whereas the other segments of government are kind of delusional and living in their own world where there are no limits to U.S. power.
Just remember that every single conflict that the People's Republic of China has had with U.S. imperialism has lost every single time since the Korean War.
Yeah, I don't think that there's much potential for a hot war, as in a direct war between the U.S. and China. A proxy situation where, the U.S. backs Taiwan, which it already does. Yes, perfect. Go ahead. Yes, you can continue.
The way I could see this going is that we sanction China over, we get the Taiwanese, just like we got the Ukrainians. We get the Taiwanese to cross the Chinese line, and they invade. I don't know how that would go. Not because I doubt Chinese military capabilities or I doubt Taiwanese. It's just invasions like that are very difficult to tell the outcome of. But I'd say it probably significantly favors a Chinese victory quickly. But if it turns, especially if it drags on, I think what you'll probably see is sanctions and then an eventual attempt to close the Straits of Malacca to Chinese shipping. And I think that's where things start to get really dangerous because of the naval stuff that ends up being in play. As
far as the Strait of Malacca goes, that's the reason China has the China-Myanmar economic corridor. I don't know how advanced it is. I don't know if it's fully ready, but that's their way of bypassing that strait. So go ahead.
There is a report by the RAND Corporation called the Air Defense Options for Taiwan, an assessment of relative costs and operational benefits. And this information is outdated by, let me see how many years. And this was published in 2016. So within a week, the People's Liberation Army could capture Taiwan province. And everyone knows that in such a scenario, it's easy for the PLA to, capture Taiwan. I think part of it is the Pentagon doesn't want to deal with this, but the State Department, the State Department doesn't care about maintaining the status quo in Taiwan. It doesn't even care if reunification happens by force, because what it doesn't want is peaceful reunification, which Chinese mainlanders and Taiwanese eventually agree to. And they were on that sort of trajectory until the turn of the century, when all this separatist ideology really started getting propagated in a top-down fashion when the DPP first came to power with the election of Chen Shui-bian. But sorry, it's getting late here, and I'm losing my train of thought. But
you're good.
Under with forceful reunification, you have a Taiwan that is very volatile, that is even more capable of causing the Chinese mainland, causing Beijing, causing the Communist Party of China trouble than just, a peaceful status quo. Think 2008 to 2016, that period of time when the cross-strait relations were, I would say, at their most stable. I think even 2000 to 2008, they were all right, except the Communist Party of China was not exactly thrilled with Chen Shui-bian being leader, but it was like whatever. At the same time, they certainly weren't as bad as they were now. And I think when Chen Shui-bian was leader, even though his party officially sides with independence, during his leadership, like when he was elected in 2000, the majority of the people in Taiwan saw Taiwan separatism as like a group of basically political thugs trying to ruin the stability of the people. So it was hugely unpopular. And the first thing he had to promise the people in Taiwan when he was elected was that he will not change the name of the government, the so-called Republic of China. He will not amend the constitution. He will not do this, do that. But towards the end of his leadership, he did get rid of the reunification ministry or whatever it's called. And anyways, a volatile Taiwan would be very useful for U.S. purposes, and that cannot be accomplished if the status quo were maintained when things were relatively stable, or if peaceful reunification were allowed to happen. So in a way, I think certain elements of the U.S. ruling class do welcome Beijing, like, kind of being impatient and saying, oh, Pelosi's going, we're going to just go in and recapture Taiwan. I don't think that's how things are going to play out, because China sees the bigger picture, and it's not, but at the same time, it also needs to send a message to the U.S. that like it's serious about sovereignty. But on another topic, in this sort of scenario of a cross-strait war situation, I don't know if people know this, but the military in Taiwan is actually the last part of the government that the separatists haven't really gotten a strong foothold of. Because if you know the history, the military people, it's mostly dominated by people who arrived in Taiwan in 1949 and not like the people from before. And even though they have this anti-communist legacy, what's even greater than their anti-communist ideology is their Chinese patriotism and their Chinese nationalism, and the fact that they identify as Chinese. And the Bonapartist Hao Bo-chun, he was the chief of general staff of the military in the 1980s, which means all the top brass now were appointed by him. And Hao Bo-chun was a thorn in the U.S. ruling class, because when Jiang Jingguo, Chiang Kai-shek's son, died, they were worried that his faction of the KMT would take over and carry out a palace coup against the liberal Li Donghui, which the U.S. supported. So think about it. The top brass today was appointed basically by this one guy that the U.S. hated, and this guy was always like, I read his memoir. He's like always bitching about how like the CIA's like he kind of bitched about communists, but he was even more annoyed about like the CIA going, yeah, man, our issue with the communists is a domestic matter. It's an issue between different factions of Chinese people. Like, what's the CIA doing? Like, always up in our business. And yeah, those are the people who are top brass in the military now. And do you think they're going to look their men in their eyes and send them to their deaths for a cause they don't even believe in? So this is like the Achilles heel. It has to be the military.
It's not exactly analogous to Ukraine because of this, right?
Yeah. So I think now looking at the DPP is very opportunist. But it's also not stupid. I think of the DPP as I think of Tsai Ing-wen as somewhat of a Zelensky, but not a dumbass like Zelensky, because Tsai Ing-wen, her mentor.
So what do you make of Ilhan Omar and Cori Bush having dinner with a DPP politician? The fact that progressives are doing it, it's interesting.
Don't want to interject too much, but Rashid Tlaib is a landlord.
I've always found it strange. I mean, I don't know the reason for this. Why is it that in U.S. politics, it's the Democrats or the left within in the U.S. who are against Russia, and then the Republicans are against China? Is there a reason for that, or is it just purely like a political, partisan, artificial divide?
There's no political difference in foreign policy between the Democratic and the Republican Party, and there hasn't been since the CIA killed JFK. They're the exact same in foreign policy. The only difference is
Nixon.
Okay, all right, yeah, but they also got rid of him, and I mean his foreign policy wasn't particularly good either. I mean, he carpet bombed Cambodia.
Nixon was based in general.
Trump kind of started deviating from like the establishment line a little bit in a limited capacity. His cabinet
he
was
tried to, but Biden was the one to pull out of Afghanistan. But that doesn't mean Biden is good.
Bullshit. That's not
what do you
true.
mean?
Biden was the one who broke the deal.
There's being kicked out. There's pulling out and there's being kicked out. Okay, don't say he was the one who pulled out of Afghanistan.
Trump is much less of a
It
threat
happened under Biden. It didn't happen under
Nancy
Trump.
Pelosi.
It wasn't something he did of his own will. He would have stayed in there if he could. What are you talking about? Donald Trump willingly pulled out of the Middle East. He wasn't kicked out.
Yes. Biden was supposed to leave by May 1st. He extended the withdrawal deadline until August when he was finally kicked out. He did not consult the Taliban before he made this unilateral decision to extend the deadline. Even the Taliban, they said that Biden broke the deal. Biden did not meet the withdrawal deadline. Trump met all previous withdrawal deadlines, and that's the reason why they endorsed
I mean, I don't see how you can argue that withdrawal from Afghanistan was anyone else but Trump. But real quick, back to China, Taiwan. A take that I haven't seen spread too much is what I think is probably going to happen, or slightly a more sane way for China to get what it wants because of all the issues that Xiangyu brought up, like the Taiwan military being multi-generational KMT and so forth. And this is that China can just blockade Taiwan, and because Taiwan is not a sovereign state, it would not violate international law, and so Taiwan would collapse in a matter of weeks, and you wouldn't need an invasion, and you wouldn't need to come up against any of these other issues. I'm pretty sure the Taiwanese military wouldn't really bat an eye, right? So yeah, I mean, I think that's like a route that people have been underplaying. And I think that's likely to happen.
I feel like China is happy with the status quo right now, though. I think the idea is that the U.S. is maybe provoking them into taking action. Possibly that's what you're responding to, is that they may decide to do this in response to these provocative actions from the U.S.
That's exactly. I mean, if you look at China's already stockpiling food, they're stockpiling food imports from Brazil and stuff. So I think they're anticipating some kind of sanction response, like an all-out sanction response from the West. And they might just use that on Taiwan because it's a lot cheaper than sending troops and so across the strait and so forth. So yeah,
sending troops across the strait is just I mean, if it has to be done, it has to be done. But it's just okay, it's easy for them to win, but it's just the aftermath. Just thinking about, man, we're all Chinese people, but then because of this, it's going to. I mean, even the KMT taking back Taiwan after it was colonized for 50 years, it was just such a disaster and such a mess that it took so many years to stabilize. It's going to suck for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, as you were saying, a childless Taiwanese who had to do 4 months of military service or something aren't going to fight the PLA. That's just not going to happen. I think
4 months.
It's going to be a blockade. It's going to be economic pressure. I think it's most likely
blockade, and at most an all-out trade war between the U.S. and China will bring down the U.S. way before it'll have any major effect on China.
And also regarding Taiwan, what did Donald Trump say when he was asked about it? He said, if China takes Taiwan, there isn't a fucking thing we can do about it.
And it's true.
On the episode I just did, Daniel on my show, he brought up a very hilarious Trump quote of Trump meeting with Xi and being like, us together, we can do almost everything. Wait a minute. No, we can actually do everything.
I like
the idea of Biden and Xi in the foothills of the Himalayas. That sounds more cool.
That sounds based. This is the thing that I don't understand what American hawks why are they so scared of Chinese hegemony or a Chinese-led global order? You'll just get high speed rail and you'll consume the same amount of bullshit commodities you consume. Yeah, exactly. You'll have 5G. It'll be based.
Dude, they want to destroy the human race. Anything that benefits humanity, they're against.
Hey, going back to something you said earlier, Samirah, the Pentagon being the only government agency that seems to be able to hold an independent line or at least push back on Pelosi's senile nonsense. Caleb Maupin has also spoken about how he thinks the military is where you could see it a contradiction break through within the U.S. government and a faction of the military actually taking leadership. He's mentioned Tulsi Gabbard, and I think you do see Colonel McGregor, taking his own line on Ukraine versus other generals like Mark Milley or whatever, pushing a very liberal sort of globalist line.
I'll simplify it for everyone. It's Kissinger versus Soros on Ukraine. That's the difference, right? Even Kissinger, he's quite based on China, and he took a very level-headed approach on Russia and Ukraine, in contrast to George Soros, right? So that's the difference we're seeing play out right now. I mean, thanks for telling me that about Caleb. It's just, I agree with him. I think that the military-industrial complex, which I'm referring to the defense industry and the Pentagon, I feel like they're coming out as the sane ones on these very critical issues. It's the State Department and that intelligence wing that are absolutely bonkers. Sorry.
Yeah, it's a funny situation, the elite factions current day in the U.S. is. There was a book about this by Carl Oglesby called The Yankee and Cowboy War, and it's a pretty clarifying read, but it was written by like a New Left guy, and he's kind of cringe in the New Left way, but it talked about these elite factions in like the 70s, and so the Yankee faction is the kind of like Eastern establishment, like Rockefeller Republican. You could even throw someone like Kissinger in there, even though Kissinger is kind of like a continental oddball in the mix. But so you have like the Eastern establishment, and then on the other hand, you have these cowboys, so these kind of like oil billionaires and so forth, who are like making their fortunes out west and are like into like drilling, like into like doing shit with the earth and so forth, like kind of like frontier capitalism. But I don't know. I guess like the Koch brother, the surviving brother, is like kind of a cowboy. But in general, like everything's become I guess like geopolitically they have kind of like different visions, because the Yankees are like staunch Atlanticists, right? They want like more connections with Europe and so forth. And the Cowboys, they were more about like hemisphere. They had like the the Monroe Doctrine more in mind. They wanted to like expand American power into Mexico, Central America, and Latin America. But you really see
that sense why Bizo-tankies are obsessed with U.S. interference or U.S. intervention in the Western Hemisphere, while ignoring the rest of the world. You see what I'm saying?
Exactly. Yeah. The kind of cowboy faction just died, and we never really got their vision, which I think is like a more sensible vision. Like just geopolitically speaking, for America is to focus on our hemisphere. But that vision kind of died.
I think it's kind of the split between the globalist financial class and the more industrialist, or at least like material industrialist, productive, more national.
Yeah, it's like the industrialists aren't down for like the Malthusian shit and the degrowth politics and stuff. Whereas like the financiers and those types, they're the ones like pushing all that stuff.
Real quick, guys, I gotta go. It's been a great talk, but I have to get to bed here.
All right, thank you so much for co-hosting.
See you guys.
I appreciate it.
Thank you.
I mean, don't feel obligated to stay in the space. You can leave whenever you want to come back. I mean, we'll continue as long as people are interested in speaking.
I want to put forward a brief thought here, which is I had said earlier, I guess in exchange with Triumph, and I do think that this is the case, that you have a dynamic in which this neoliberal system run by that globalist faction, run by the central bankers, and really, failing utterly to be able to both keep its dominance and to provide anything for the populations that it represents in the countries that are primarily organized under that. They are confronting the collapse of their system. And it is because their system is collapsing that they are targeting an alternative dynamic coming out of the BRICS Plus, coming out of the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, and the Belt and Road Initiative. And it's increasingly understood that there's a new opportunity. If you look at the BRICS Plus Summit, you have to go and read the statements from the leaders who spoke there. Fernandez, who's president of Argentina, he said, he explicitly stated something that you hear all the time from the Schiller Institute, which is, we need a new international economic system. The new name for peace is development, which is a quote from an encyclical by Pope Paul VI called Populorum Progressio. And he was not the only one. The president of Algeria gave a very strong statement on the need for a completely new international financial system, economic system. And you can go through the list. We've published some on this. There are plenty of other examples. What this will require is a reorganization of the financial system. And whatever factions are sane, as we're discussing presently in the United States, in the establishment, among other political capabilities that do exist or can be formed, we need to get people together to advance a solution to that fundamental problem. The Schiller Institute has been proposing a new Bretton Woods system, the reorganization of the world economy under a system basically steered by Russia, India, and China, by those three major economies, which have got to collaborate, and they are doing so at an increasing rate. And I want to encourage people to study what we're putting out, which is based on the economics of Lyndon LaRouche, including because it's being discussed at the very high level. There have been a series of seminars hosted by Dr. Wang Wen, who's the executive director of the Chongyang Institute of Finance at Renmin University in Beijing, along with his counterpart in Russia, or a chosen counterpart in this case, who's Sergei Glaziev, the very leading economist who's played a major role in the development of the Eurasian Economic Union. And they are talking right now about what is this new economic system going to look like? What's the reserve currency going to be? How are they going to handle that kind of thing? And there are factional battles happening. I think in Russia, there's still a lot of bad policies that are being implemented at the central bank. They haven't quite figured it out yet. But there's a great motion in this direction. And if we could get some people in the U.S. who would acknowledge this and work with us, it would make an enormous difference. And
Daniel, can I ask a question?
Yeah, let me conclude with one quick thing, and then please go ahead, which is just that the petition that we're circulating on this was just signed by the Prime Minister of Yemen and the Houthi government. So we're getting very significant signers to it. Please go ahead.
I was just wondering, because I'm actually not really sure about this. When people talk about a new Bretton Woods system, what does that actually mean? Isn't the Bretton Woods system something like a gold standard or something along those lines? Or am I just completely off?
No, you're not. The key issue that we're trying to advance is that you need a fixed exchange rate system in the world again. In 1971, that was taken down and we were put into a floating exchange rate system. And that's the creation of George Soros. It's a creation of, in other words, a class of people who they make their billions by manipulating currencies. And if you're going to manipulate currencies, then, you look at the bankers' arithmetic of the IMF. They enumerate your loan, for example, to Mexico in the 1970s in dollars, but then the peso falls by 1,000% or whatever it may be, and now you owe more money than you did before because of the floating exchange rate and everything that opens up. If we want to have a stable system whereby investment could be made, credit could be extended for the industrial development of all nations, as we've been seeing with the Belt and Road Initiative, then we're going to have to increase that capability through fixed exchange rates, increase the stability and create stability, and we're going to have to also cancel the worthless debt. So there are 8 points to this that we've put forward, which I'll put up on my Twitter. But we need to go with Glass-Steagall, for example. This is how we mean to use this phrase in reference to the original intentions of the Bretton Woods, not in terms of simply replicating what did finally come into existence in the Bretton Woods. That system was corrupted. It did not really fulfill its intentions. But if you look at the original intentions of Franklin Roosevelt and Harry Dexter White, they were planning exactly this type of effort to maximize economic development for the world.
Daniel, I have a question for you and I guess the other LaRoucheites about implementing like such a system, or even I guess the language that you use. And I guess this goes back to when I first tuned into the space. I think people were talking about the stark contrast between the COVID response in the PRC versus in kind of like these Western democracies where there's just no popular kind of like buy-in to these state policies, even though like they were kind of aiming to do the same outcome with similar measures. And I think this question is like pretty important. So like to put it to you, like how would you avoid something like what you call the new Bretton Woods being construed by like the popular base as just kind of like another like social engineering kind of NWO 2.0 type thing? I know like practically it's different, but like I guess what what language, like I'm thinking about here in the EU, like this is why I don't think that the Great Reset will ever.
It would be marketed, how it would be sold to the population.
Kinda. Let me try to explain what I'm getting at. Like here in the EU, the reason why I don't think the Great Reset will ever work is because when the crisis actually comes, like most of the the trust in the kind of like language and behaving and language policing and like behavior policing that these like globalist institutions have relied upon during like quote unquote normal times, they just immediately collapse. So like the EU was like barely a presence in my country when COVID started. Like people just immediately like short off any kind of tacit kind of like acceptance of like EU, like this whole sustainable governance, the environmentally conscious like kind of green agenda that the EU is like that's like core to the EU these days, right? Like that just immediate, like that facade just dropped immediately. So I think it's really true that like, moments of crises, they like disclose the truth. They like disclose the real in a way that this like fake sustainable development kind of like multilateral globalist order just can't, it's just so self-contradictory that it will never be able to cope with like real crises. And COVID was like barely a crisis, let's be honest. So I was just curious, like how would you like, what kind of language would you use? How would you like market your system in a way that just feels authentic to the people, not just like a kind of like alternative globalist like plan or whatever, if you know what I'm getting at.
Yeah, I think I do. I mean, the equivalent of a community of shared destiny, which is of course the language in English of Xi Jinping, in the US would be a community of sovereign nation states, or a community of principle, of sovereign nation states. These are phrases that come from John Quincy Adams, who had a very elevated conception of the role of the United States. Of course, he's famous for his statement that the United States should not go looking for monsters abroad. So I would lift up the true conceptions that are embedded in the U.S. Constitution that are derived from the very beautiful notions of people like Benjamin Franklin and Alexander Hamilton, also Franklin Roosevelt, and we want to draw that. We want to bring people into that sort of living history and revive it for them. But the reference to Franklin Roosevelt is really crucial because that was a time when we went through a disastrous situation and we had leadership that cared about the population, and we implemented Glass-Steagall in 1933. It was on the 100th day of his presidency, which is why they refer to the 100 days nowadays. And what that measure would mean today would be forcing the banks to go through a bankruptcy reorganization process where you would take the bad assets, the worthless financial crap, and you would split it off, and most of it would have to be written off. We're talking about like a majority of this debt would have to be simply written off as being not at all acceptable, not at all, worth anything. So that reference point, I think, is crucial. And otherwise, my view is that LaRouche is a crucial reference point, and the World Land Bridge and so forth, because LaRouche was fighting for these ideas. He was put in prison by the exact people that everyone knows have been destroying this country. And if we can bring him forward as a personality, that's of course what I'm trying to do. I think people can get a deeper conception of how this can be implemented from an American standpoint, from a constitutional standpoint. But fundamentally, I think we're going to have to get people to organize, to conceive of mutual benefit with China. A positive conception of China and the collaboration with China is the absolute necessity for any kind of decent political action in the United States.
I think there is actually like a populistic aspect to a lot of these ideas and policies. For example, the Bretton Woods thing, I mean, it sounds a little bit confusing it sounded confusing to me, but what it actually means in everyday language sounds like a movement away from financialization and the fake Federal Reserve printing lots of money. It almost brings to mind like the old Ron Paul libertarian ideas of, bringing back the gold standard and so on. I think that would resonate with ordinary people. Like a lot of this stuff is just fake, and that's the way they feel about it. Like a lot of our economy is just built on fake printing money and so on, and it's the movement away from that. And I feel like a lot of these notions can be put into that kind of language which would appeal to people.
Yeah, I agree with you. And it was, although, the libertarian European economic view, I think, has failed and does not make any sense, including what they say mean when they say gold standard. What we need is the ability to mobilize massive amounts of state credit. That's what it was in Hamilton. That's what the Chinese are doing through their banks, their national banks. And it means that we would, it's also what Roosevelt did with the Recovery Finance Corporation, or Reconstruction Finance Corporation, excuse me. And that's going to be crucial. Since 1913, we've had a completely unconstitutional central bank, the Federal Reserve. We can nationalize it. I don't think that it's necessary to nationalize all banks. I don't think that's necessary. I think that would be counterproductive. But to nationalize the Federal Reserve would mean having the ability to do what, a national bank does. The Federal Reserve doesn't do crap. In other words, none of the credit that they produce goes into the real economy. It all goes into speculative activity. We need to be able to extend credit for high-speed trains in the United States, for massive water projects like the North American Water and Power Alliance. We need to be able to extend it for science and development, and that's what that would achieve. So Alexander Hamilton is a wonderful point of reference. And I would also encourage people who are curious about this question to look into Diane Sayre's campaign for U.S. Senate. She is the only independent candidate on the ballot against Schumer and the Republican. She's the LaRouche independent. I'm working on her campaign, and you can see how she tries to present it.
Just as a kind of a quick change of subject, I remember the title a little bit back. This is a question for Samirah. Where does the Richard Nixon is base take come from? Maybe I'm unfamiliar with his political legacy, but wasn't he quite...
Richard Nixon established ties with China against what at that time the political establishment wanted.
Wasn't that like part of the Vietnam War and putting pressure on North Vietnam? No,
excuse me?
I've read a little bit about this because I was you said Nixon. I was like, what, he didn't pull out of Vietnam, but he was in there for 5 years. And I read something about, as well as when you're talking about Kissinger, because he also was Secretary of State during Vietnam at some point in Vietnam. And
I'm talking about China.
Yeah, I think it's fair to give him credit
China,
for that. I mean, the Vietnam policy was universal, right? There wasn't...
Yeah.
So
Kissinger
I think it's fair to give credit
China
in one place
and
where he differed from the majority of
USSR.
Yeah, and at that point, you had the Soviet Union and you had China. You had the Soviet Union almost try to nuke China, which Richard Nixon single-handedly stopped. So imagine if he hadn't done that. So I take a broader view of these when I'm judging different presidents like Richard Nixon or JFK and so on and so forth. I don't really understand the whitewashing of JFK. I think it's ahistorical. I honestly think it's xenophobic because he was extremely anti-China. I mean, even Mao said that JFK was worse than Truman, but then we have people like, let's just be honest, Baizo-Tankis who are trying to whitewash JFK and make Richard Nixon the villain.
Yeah, that's Baizo revisionism. I'm Nixbull. Richard Nixon, people forget that in the 1970s, Nixon actually fought the stagflation, the so-called stagflation crisis really effectively, and he implemented price and wage controls, most notably, I think in 1970 or 1971, to great effect, and that goes underappreciated. And I think Daniel alluded to this earlier. He took America off of the Bretton Woods system by decoupling from the gold peg. It was like $35 to an ounce or something like that. But he did that at a time where, from the point of view of American hegemony, and this was also Kissinger's appraisal of the strategic situation, it was a moment when, due to stagflation, America's trade balance was tipping into deficit, most obviously due to German and Japanese industrial competition, and there wasn't going to be a sudden recovering of American exports. So the whole geopolitical strategy of taking America off the Bretton Woods system is to really just use the dollar to be like the new like kind of tool through which America will still be like the financial set and the source of like world demand for the world goods, basically, and also of course financial assets. So Nixon and Kissinger really engineered the so-called I think the American century really started in the 1970s with Nixon and Kissinger, and I think Nixon was the most far-seeing American president just period. So I can't really see, JFK just looks like a toddler mentally.
Sounds like he took the right side. Sounds like he took the right side on the Soviet split as well.
Yeah.
I think if you haven't already at this time, please read Henry Kissinger's On China. I've suggested this book before in the past, and people are like, I'm not going to read anything by Henry Kissinger.
They said the same thing to me. I posted it on Twitter. They were so angry. They were like, oh, Kissinger bombed Cambodia. I'm like, okay, it's not a laughing matter. I'm sorry, but come on.
Yeah, but he was also a major player in U.S. history that shaped Sino-U.S. relations for better or worse for like the next decades to come. So you might as well understand it.
Yeah, and then Baizo gets so mad when Chinese people, when they admire Kissinger, like on Twitter, you have angry Western leftists yelling at Chinese people. Like, they don't understand why Kissinger and Nixon would be admired in China, because that's just how, oh my God, they're losers. I can't stand them. I really don't like this JFK revisionism that we're seeing, because one of the talking points they say, oh, JFK was so great because he thought about ending the Vietnam War. If he had survived, he would have ended the Vietnam War. Okay, you are admiring...
The Vietnamese ended the Vietnam War.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so he said, sorry, what did they say? They said, they like JFK for thinking about it, but then they're not going to give props to Nixon for actually doing it. Granted, a little later, but at the end of the day, Nixon actually did it. And on top of that, he stabilized relations with China. I mean, it was life-changing. It was game-changing. And also you have the Soviet Union. He wanted détente with both the Soviet Union and China, unlike JFK, who wanted to bring the Soviet Union on its side regarding China. He wanted to take down China. He wanted to balkanize China, and he wanted to denuclearize it or prevent it from acquiring nuclear weapons.
Yeah, fuck JFK. Listen to the Nixon tapes. Also, Nixon was a comedian in addition to being a good president. He was like the first Trump. He was like Rodney Dangerfield. Yeah, listen to the Nixon tapes. Also, watch Secret Honor by Robert Altman. That movie. Nixon should be a cultural icon. He's really he's underrepresented.
Well, there's way too many Baizo right now who are trying to make a different case. I mean, I saw another ML, like an anti-imperialist journalist, who said, hey, JFK wasn't imperialist. If anyone would know if JFK was an imperialist or not, it would be the Soviet Union. I mean, like, are you joking? It's just a complete ignorance of Sino-U.S. relations. The Soviet Union tried to nuke China. I mean, it's
the deep state took out Nixon too. Yeah.
Yeah, the deep state tried. I mean, the entire election in 1960 against JFK was rigged. That was the first time they tried. And then, one other time during Nixon's presidency, and then finally with Watergate. So it was 3 attempts.
Yeah, people forget that Watergate was like one of the first instances where there was just deep conspiring between like mainstream media and like the kind of the deep state faction against the incumbent government. Like that was very rare. Like mainstream media being so deep in opposition to the executive branch, like or at least the unitary executive. Like I can't think of another time that's happened aside from Trump that was the case with Nixon.
Knowing that history does bring up some questions about Trump and January 6th and all that the right people sometimes point to.
Let's not get banned on Twitter. Let's not even bring that up. But I mean, I like this topic. I'm glad that account brought it up. What do you make of this whitewashing and rebranding of JFK as anti-imperialist? Because I mean, there's a lot of people doing it. It's sort of been mainstreamed. I was dubbed like CIA for basically saying that, hey, JFK was anti-China. He wanted to destroy China. They literally called me CIA. So I feel like Oliver Stone is one of those figures who are doing this, and they're using a lot of allied journalists to make their case. So, I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts on this.
Before we get too deep into it, I wanted to make a response to your earlier comment saying, well, if anyone knew JFK was the enemy, it would have been the Soviet Union. Well, JFK was president from 1961 to 1963. Who was the general secretary of the CPSU during then?
Khrushchev.
Yes, and Khrushchev, somehow he is some sort of leading figure of anti-U.S. imperialism when he was so cucked to the Americans, let's face it.
Yeah, exactly. But then people who disagree with us on the Sino-Soviet split, they would argue otherwise. They think that for some reason, between 1949 and 1971, everything was going fine until Mao woke up one day in 1971 and decided to shake hands with Nixon. That's their view of history. It's ridiculous. It's, almost laughable.
I am going to duck out now. I've had a great time, and thank you, everyone, for listening.
Thank you, Daniel. Thank you for bringing up nuclear fusion. It's really exciting what the future is going to bring in a multipolar world. Appreciate it.
Man. Enjoyed having you in here. Thank you.
Really, really good meeting a lot of people for the first time. Take care.
Thank you so much.
All right, Daniel. But yeah, boomers for some reason seem to have this fixation on Nixon. I think it's because he died sort of early, and so they can project into the future. Oh, he would have done all these great things. Or sorry, not Nixon, JFK. I'm sorry.
Yeah, millennials also who think of JFK as this sort of martyr, right? Nixon to them is this evil right-winger. It's like the Trump versus Biden type of thing. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah. Do people not know about the history of the Kennedy family? Joseph Kennedy, for Christ's sake? Come on.
Yeah, the Kennedys are fucking evil. The thing that got me interested into Nixon was Roger Stone, actually.
Oh, yeah. What was Stone's connection again? Can you elaborate? I used to know this, but I forgot.
I added a tweet to the space, so check that out.
Do you mean Oliver Stone?
No, Roger, right?
No, Roger Stone helped with his campaign, if I'm not mistaken.
How old is Roger Stone? I have to look that up.
He's older than dirt. Probably 80.
Well, I would like your opinion on the tweet that I just posted in this space. So anyone wants to chime in, this was the tweet I was referring to. And there were a lot of other people making this argument.
Didn't Khrushchev and JFK have a meeting in Vienna where Khrushchev just rhetorically beat the shit out of JFK or something?
I don't know about any specific, I don't know the details of these specific meetings, but I do know that JFK was vehemently anti-China. So the argument that he was supposedly anti-imperialist doesn't hold because the Soviet Union sided with the U.S. to take down China. Khrushchev at one point was even convinced by the Americans to try and convince Mao to drop the Taiwan issue. Forget it. That's what he was trying to convince Mao doing. He even went to Mao and he said something like, what was it? I don't understand your position on the Taiwan issue. And then Khrushchev also backed the Dalai Lama. And JFK started the Sino-Indian War. He was the primary actor behind it. So
go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's it. Go ahead.
I was going to say, it's easy to think that JFK was kind of a weak president, but why did he get taken out if he wasn't based? I don't believe one way or another. I'm just trying to make conversation.
I feel like people who see him as a martyr, they're the ones who want to investigate his death. I really don't care. Yeah, it's something that I would be interested in knowing. But I'm not going to go out of my way to learn, why he was taken out.
It easily could have been a very narrow issue like Cuba or something like that. It doesn't necessarily say anything about his
internal contradictions within the U.S. ruling class. I think that's what was behind it, perhaps. If they say that the CIA took him out, maybe he was getting too close to the Pentagon. I don't know.
Well, it's interesting, the Cuba situation, because the mafia had a lot of interest in Cuba. So there has been talk about the mafia being involved, but who knows? I don't know.
If anyone else wants to chime in.
I personally do find the JFK conspiracy stuff to be interesting just because it's a topic that has more documentation surrounding it than almost anything else. So you can dig into it for days.
There was more meddling and there was more shady shit going on with the Nixon stuff and multiple attempts. But instead, we're focusing on JFK. I find that interesting because it's mostly liberals who want to rebrand JFK. We're not doing the same sort of investigation when it comes to Nixon. That's all.
JFK is the reason the war in Vietnam even started.
Can you elaborate on that?
Okay, I take back that statement, or with qualifications. But I mean, he started the very beginning of the escalation that LBJ then accelerated massively.
It started with him, with all the CIA advisors and all that stuff he sent over. So I mean,
I think it started in '54, just immediately after the Geneva Conference, in small levels. But JFK was the beginning. I think that like he was the only person that could have stopped the machinery from, when you start escalating troops, it's just kind of, whenever troop escalations happen, just send more and more and more and more and more. It kind of
seems like even at best, even if he had like secretly some good intentions, he was thoroughly cucked by the establishment.
I'm trying to make an anti-JFK.
Yeah, I'm agreeing with you as well. But yeah, there's the other aspect of, he was kind of glamorous and a celebrity, so it's easier to fixate on him than someone like Nixon, who not particularly photogenic and didn't have the best personality. So if you're going to lionize someone, it's not going to be Nixon necessarily.
Yeah. Honestly, Nixon was base. Favorite U.S. president. I know I might be oversimplifying things, but
favorite? Wait, that's your favorite? Teddy Roosevelt. Come on now.
It's clearly Lincoln, but yeah.
Okay, fine. Lincoln, but I mean, I guess
if you want to say modern.
No, it's Roosevelt. It's Roosevelt.
No, yeah.
Roosevelt. Why do you say that? What's so great about Teddy Roosevelt? He had some trustworthiness.
The guy got shot and then made fun of his assailant. Continued his speech.
I feel like there's more to that story. How do you get shot and continue your speech?
Exactly. Like, you have to be a man of high caliber to be able to do that. He got shot and he was making a speech. He got shot and he continued speaking for an hour, finished his speech, made fun of his assailant, and then, yeah.
All right, well, it's 2 a.m. I have to go eat dinner. Yes, I'm Asian. I like to eat dinner late. So I'm going to end this space. Thank you so much for participating. I really appreciate it. The recording will be up. Thank you to all of my co-hosts. We'll do this again